Welcome back to Sleep Nova. Sit back, relax, and don't forget to comment where you're watching from down below. It's amazing seeing people all around the world supporting my small channel. Now, enjoy the show. A lone human body drifts in the silent darkness, high above the blue curve of Earth. Eyes wide, heart calm, they float effortlessly, suspended between the radiant planet below and the endless stars above. The only sound is their own breath, a gentle rhythm in the vacuum of space. Below, a fragile swirl of whites, blues, and browns, the Earth glows against the black cosmic sea. In this weightless moment, time itself seems to pause. There is only the rise and fall of breathing, the steady beating of a heart, and the profound sight of home hovering in the distance. In this quiet ballet of body and cosmos, a sense of both awe and belonging washes over them. They extend a hand, as if to touch the curved horizon of Earth far beneath. Cities sparkle faintly on the night side like scattered embers. Daylight paints clouds and oceans in brilliant hues. The atmosphere is a delicate halo, a thin shell of life clinging to a solitary world. From up here, there are no borders, no sounds of human hustle, just a silent, spinning sphere and the tiny figure gazing down, wondering. The human body, unbound from gravity, moves with slow grace, a gentle turn, a slow tumble, like an infant cradled in the womb of space. For as long as humans have walked the Earth, we have dreamed of this view. We have imagined ourselves among the stars, our stories reaching upward when our bodies could not. Ancient poets and storytellers looked up at the night sky and populated it with their hopes and gods. Perhaps this drifting soul remembers some of those old tales, of a Chinese goddess, Chang'e, carried to the moon by the elixir of immortality, of the winged Icarus who flew too close to the sun, of heavenly ladders and chariots carrying mortals skyward in mythic flights. In every culture, the sky was the realm of the divine and the impossible, and yet we were drawn to it, hearts full of longing. Now here, floating above Earth, myth becomes tangible truth. The stars no longer feel out of reach. The person floats as if in a dream, fulfilling an ancient yearning written into our very bones. In this moment, the boundary between dream and reality blurs. The body recalls stories of those who dared to imagine this weightlessness. Perhaps it remembers the science fiction tales devoured in youth, intrepid travelers in rocket ships, space stations spinning with artificial gravity, cities on Mars beneath pink skies. Those fictions were the seeds of our reality. They carried the torch of the old myths, keeping the spark alive through centuries until technology could catch up. The lone figure in orbit closes their eyes, feeling the warmth of the sun on their face, unfiltered by any atmosphere. They think of those who imagined this moment long ago. A writer in ancient Greece who told of a ship whisked to the moon by a waterspout, a Renaissance astronomer who wrote of demons carrying voyages into the heavens, a 19th century novelist who fired a space capsule from a giant cannon. All those dreams, absurd and beautiful, have led to this quiet instant above the Earth. Slowly, they open their eyes again. Tears would float free in this microgravity, but there is only wonder, no sadness. Below, Earth turns, and with it turn the ages of human history that led us here. How many generations looked up at the moon and stars with longing? How many nights on the plains or in ancient cities did our ancestors whisper stories about living in the sky? It was a collective dream shared across cultures and time, a dream that one day, somehow, we might slip the surly bonds of Earth and make our home among those lights in the night. And now the dreamer is awake in the heavens. The human body in space is real, fragile, miraculous. As they take it all in, the silent symphony of Earth and stars, a thought arises, gentle but persistent. Can we live in outer space? Floating above the only home we've ever known, The question feels both urgent and natural. The body drifts on, turning slowly end over end, and the Earthrise in their visor reflects the dawn of a new idea. Perhaps our home is not just that distant blue sphere, but also the space around it, the moon, the planets, and even the stars beyond. Perhaps this is the first step of a long journey outward. In the depths of those eyes staring into the cosmic abyss, there is courage and curiosity. The same traits that drove explorers across oceans now carry us beyond our atmosphere. The human in orbit gently pivots to look away from Earth, out into the star-speckled darkness. There are no familiar landmarks there, only infinity. It is beautiful and terrifying all at once. The Milky Way spills its pale light, and one cannot help feeling both tiny and grand. Tiny as a speck in an unfathomable expanse, yet grand as a bearer of consciousness, a piece of the universe that can behold itself. They stretch out their arms as if to embrace the cosmos. In the emptiness, one feels an unexpected fullness, a connection to all of humanity, to those on Earth below, and to those who will someday venture further. Floating here is not an escape, but a homecoming of a different sort, a return to the stars that forged the atoms in our bodies. We are children of the universe, and now, finally, we have begun to come home. The radio crackles with a distant voice. Mission control, a reminder of the links that still tether this Voyager to Earth. The spell of absolute solitude gently breaks, but the sense of reverie remains. As the astronaut responds and prepares to return to the space station nearby, their heart lingers on that profound question. Can we live in outer space? Not just visit for moments like this, but truly live, work, love, and build a new world out here. In the serene silence, with Earthlight glinting off their visor, they know the answer lies ahead, in both dream and effort. Humanity's story has always been one of pushing frontiers, of making the imagined real. The body takes one last, slow turn, Earth filling the view once more. The journey back to the station is brief, a small thruster firing to guide them home. But the mind travels far beyond, envisioning what life among the stars might one day mean. With a gentle grasp, the astronaut re-enters the airlock of the orbiting habitat. One small step in microgravity, one giant leap carried in the heart. As the hatch closes and pressurizes with a hiss, they hold on to that feeling of floating freely above the world. It is the feeling of a dream becoming reality, of ancient myth finding new form, of humanity extending its reach. It is the beginning of a story of whether we can leave our cradle and learn to live in the cosmos. Inside the space station, the astronaut removes their helmet. Sweat floats as tiny droplets before being caught by a cloth. They tether themselves to a wall, though here it is just another surface, to keep from drifting. As they pause, they recall how impossibly distant such a moment would have seemed to our ancestors. Yet this station, this life in orbit, did not appear overnight. It was built on generations of dreaming and decades of trial and error. The notion of living away from Earth has always been with us, first as myth and fantasy, and then as concrete science and engineering. Centuries ago, long before the first rocket pierced the sky, people were already envisioning voyages beyond Earth. In ancient China, storytellers recounted the legend of a civil servant, Wan Hu, who fastened rockets to a chair in a bid to reach the stars, a mythic tale of ambition that hints at our age-old desire to escape gravity. The Greeks told of the philosopher Lucian's imaginary trip to the moon, carried by a great whirlwind, discovering odd lunar societies. A playful fantasy, but one that treated the moon as a place one could truly visit and even live. In the 17th century, Johannes Kepler wrote a story, Somnium, about a journey to the moon assisted by supernatural forces, in which he speculated earnestly about moon-dwelling creatures and the challenges of surviving in lunar conditions like cold and vacuum. Each tale, from the whimsical to the scientific, added a brushstroke to a growing portrait of life beyond Earth. The dream only intensified as knowledge grew. By the late 19th century, writers like Jules Verne took these dreams and grounded them in calculation and steel. Verne's novel, From the Earth to the Moon, imagined a colossal cannon shooting a crew in a bullet-shaped capsule into space. It was fanciful in execution, yet remarkably prescient in details. He calculated trajectories and launch sites, inspiring real engineers. Around the same time, H.G. Wells mused about anti-gravity metal in The First Men in the Moon, conjuring an underground lunar civilization. These early science fiction visions served as both entertainment and blueprint. They whispered that living in space was not just myth, it could perhaps one day be real. As the astronaut secures their helmet to the wall, they recall another figure who straddled the line between fiction and reality. A Russian schoolteacher named Konstantin Tsiolkovsky. In the late 1800s, Tsiolkovsky, inspired by Werner's stories and the gleam of the stars above, began to work out the mathematics of spaceflight. He dreamed of weightless habitats orbiting Earth, where people would float in cylindrical shells and grow plants in greenhouses to survive. Earth, he wrote, is the cradle of humanity, but one cannot remain in the cradle forever. That rallying cry from a quiet man in a provincial town became a mantra for the new century. Across the ocean, an American named Robert Goddard and a Transylvanian-born Hermann Oberth also believed passionately that humanity could break free of Earth. They built small rockets, tested strange fuels, and scribbled equations late into the night, often ridiculed for their moon-mad ideas. But they persevered. The space station vibrates ever so slightly as a guidance thruster fires to adjust its orbit. The astronaut smiles, thinking how that gentle push traces its intellectual lineage back to those early rocket pioneers. By the mid-20th century, rocketry had leapt from theory to practice, though initially for war. The roar of the V-2 rockets over Europe during World War II was a sinister harbinger, but in the rubble of that conflict, the seeds of human spaceflight were found. Engineers who once built weapons turned their eyes upward, repurposing technology for exploration. In a single generation, humanity vaulted from dreaming about spaceflight to actually riding fire into the heavens. It happened on a spring day in 1961. A Russian named Yuri Gagarin squeezed into a tiny spherical capsule atop a towering rocket. With a thunderous launch, he became the first human to leave the Earth's embrace, orbiting the planet in 108 minutes. As he gazed down on the Earth, the first of us to see our world from above, Gagarin reportedly marveled at the beauty of it, at the thinness of the atmosphere. When he safely returned, the world erupted in celebration and astonishment. The impossible had become possible. The cradle's grip was loosened, if only for a single orbit. After Gagarin's leap came a cascade of milestones. Americans sent John Glenn orbiting soon after, and just 8 years later, in 1969, Neil Armstrong's boot pressed into the grey dust of the moon. For a moment, it seemed all of humanity stood on that desolate lunar sea with him, hearts pounding as he uttered about one small step and a giant leap. In that grainy broadcast, the ancient dream of living in space found its first foothold on another world, if only briefly. The Apollo astronauts spent mere hours or days on the moon, camping in fragile landers. Yet, as they looked up at the marble of Earth hanging in the black sky, they carried back a message: that we could physically exist on another world, albeit for a short time, and that our own planet was both beautiful and heartbreakingly isolated. Back on Earth, those brief extraterrestrial adventures ignited imaginations anew. In the 1970s, even as the moon missions ended, thinkers like Gerard O'Neill asked, why not build our own colonies in space? Why only visit moons and planets when we could create habitats free floating in the void, crafted by human hands to be like Earth? Concepts for gigantic rotating cylinders in space, miles long and miles in diameter, sprang from serious studies at universities and space agencies. These cylindrical colonies, O'Neill cylinders, as they came to be known, would spin to provide artificial gravity on their inner surface. Inside, they envisioned entire landscapes, fields of green, towns along a curved horizon, perhaps even artificial lakes and clouds, all enclosed by metal and glass and shielded from deadly cosmic radiation. Artists painted these dreams in vibrant detail, children flying kites in alien sky blue light, families picnicking in orbit with the Earth itself, a distant jewel in the sky. These were no mere fantasies. They were backed by thick engineering reports, calculations of how many tons of metal and water would be needed, how to harvest materials from the moon or asteroids to build them. For a moment in human discourse, living in space was not just a far future possibility. It felt on the cusp of tangible planning. But reality, as always, proceeded in smaller steps. The astronaut aboard our modern station knows this intimately. Before humanity could build floating cities, we had to learn how to survive for days, then weeks, then months beyond Earth. The 1970s brought the first true space habitats, though humble. The Soviet Union's Salyut stations and America's Skylab were early attempts, a few modules linked together, cramped and Spartan inside. Cosmonauts and astronauts lived in these tin can homes for a few months at most, learning how to sleep in weightlessness, how to eat, how to stay sane in a very finite, up-downless world. Skylab, with its roomy workshop, even allowed 3 men to spend about 3 months in orbit, conducting experiments and gazing back at Earth through a golden window. They famously snuck in time to simply watch the Earth go by, and once, feeling overwhelmed by ground control's busy schedule, they took an impromptu day off, a gentle rebellion reminding everyone that humans, not robots, lived up there with human limits and needs. Lessons accumulated. In the 1980s and 90s, Soviet cosmonauts aboard the space station Mir pushed human endurance further. They stayed not just months, but over a year in space, showing that our bodies and minds, while strained, could adapt to long durations away from Earth. Mir was a true long-term home off Earth's surface, rickety at times, cluttered with equipment and the personal touches of its crew, photos of family taped to walls, a guitar floating in a corner, occasional motes of bread or dust caught by sunlight in the cabin air. It was in those years that living in space transformed from an abstract question into a day-to-day reality for a select few. People learned to function in microgravity not as an expedition, but as a lifestyle, albeit a challenging one. Men and women orbited Earth for hundreds of days, experiencing how solitude and microgravity affect hearts, bones, and minds. They found ways to cope and flourish, exercising their muscles with rubber bungees and treadmills, sharing jokes and routines to keep morale high. All these moments, the triumphs of Gagarin and Armstrong, the slow, steady work aboard Salyut, Skylab, and Mir, were stepping stones. They answered some basic questions and raised new ones. We learned that humans could eat, sleep, and work in microgravity. But what about truly living, starting families, building societies? That remained the stuff of speculation, even as the practical groundwork was laid. The International Space Station, where our astronaut now floats, is the heir to those early stations. It is a gleaming lattice of modules, as long as a football field, assembled piece by many nations. Since the year 2000, there has not been a single day when humans were not living in orbit. Generations have now been born who have never known a time when the glow of an inhabited spacecraft couldn't be seen moving across the night sky. So, as the astronaut secures their gear and moves through the station's corridor, they are walking, or rather drifting, through the halls of what was once pure fantasy. Here, living in space is ordinary in its basics. There are bunks for sleeping, a galley for preparing meals, laboratories full of humming machines. And yet, it is extraordinary too. Just outside the thin walls lies vacuum and infinity. Every inch of this habitat is a triumph of human ingenuity and cooperation. Water is recycled from breath and sweat. Oxygen is generated from water by electrolysis, and a carefully maintained balance of air keeps them alive. The station is a bubble of Earth's environment transplanted into space, a tiny, fragile bubble that requires constant vigilance. It took thousands of people on Earth to design, build, and maintain this lifeboat in the void. In floating here, among humming computers and the soft whir of air filters, the astronaut feels the presence of all that history. The myths, the stories, the equations scribbled on paper, the fervent work of engineers, the bravery of early spacefarers. This place, this moment, is built atop all of that. And still, it is only the prologue to a much grander saga that is yet to come. For the question remains, can we truly live in outer space? We have learned how to survive for a while. We have visited the moon and inhabited low Earth orbit continuously, but survival is not the same as living fully. To live in outer space means to make it our home, not just a campsite. It means confronting challenges our ancestors never faced and solving problems our legends never imagined. The astronaut gently propels themselves toward the observation cupola, a domed window on the space station that offers a panoramic view of Earth and the cosmos. As they peer out at the blue planet below, now passing over a sunlit ocean, they consider how far we've come and how far we have yet to go. The station's orbit traces a path through day and night, and each sunrise illuminates the curved horizon with a golden glow. With each dawn, a new chapter in the dream of space living begins, built on the foundation of all the history that got us here. We are on the threshold. In that astronaut's reflection is the face of humanity, filled with determination and curiosity. The ancient dreams have led us to the present reality. Now the present reality asks us to dream again, this time with hard-earned wisdom guiding fancy. The journey to truly live in space is underway, and it carries all of our past with it, mythic heroes and real ones, propelling us toward the future. Humanity did not leap into the cosmos without introspection. Back in the early 21st century, as it became clear that technology might soon allow migrations beyond Earth, we faced pivotal questions. Who gets to go? On what terms? In the beginning, spaceflight was the domain of a few highly trained astronauts, chosen by governments through rigorous criteria focusing on skills, fitness, and mission needs. They were envoys of all humankind, but they were also elite, representing nations and carrying the prestige of their homelands into orbit. As the dream of settling space moved from fiction toward reality, it sparked both excitement and anxiety in societies worldwide. Some feared a future where only the rich or powerful could escape to space habitats, leaving the less fortunate behind on a troubled Earth. Science fiction had explored those dystopias in cautionary tales of orbiting gated communities, and society took those warnings to heart. It was crucial to ensure that space did not become just another arena of inequality. Early efforts to democratize space access began with symbolic gestures. An international teacher in space, artists sent to the space station to share the experience through creativity, a contest sending a teenager's science experiment to orbit. When private citizens, space tourists, started visiting the International Space Station, it opened a new chapter. They were wealthy adventurers, yes, but their very presence signaled that space was slowly opening beyond career astronauts. Over time, companies emerged promising to take people to orbit or the moon if they could afford a ticket, much as commercial airlines had done for air travel. Prices were astronomical at first, but tended downward. A new question arose. Should there be subsidies or lotteries to ensure not only millionaires could go? Some governments indeed began sponsoring seats for teachers, poets, or everyman citizen astronauts, emphasizing that space is for everyone. When plans for the first Mars colony were announced, the application process was broadcast globally. Thousands of hopefuls from every country sent in videos and essays, volunteering for what might be a one-way trip, at least for many years. Selection committees labored to balance skills. Farmers, engineers, doctors, technicians, psychologists, with human elements. Could these people get along in a tin can on a hostile planet? Did they represent the diversity of Earth's peoples? The world watched and debated. Reality TV shows even cropped up dramatizing the selection, which some criticized as trivializing a solemn endeavor. But it showed that humanity at large was invested. Going to Mars was not just a governmental project, it was a human project. Ethicists weighed in. How do we obtain informed consent for a mission with such uncertainty and risk? Is it right to let people effectively exile themselves to a barren world? Others argued it was akin to the great seafaring explorations or pioneer migrations of history. Bold and dangerous, yes, but driven by our intrinsic push to explore and settle. The difference? Those historical colonizations often displaced or harmed others, native peoples, exploited labor. On Mars or the Moon, there were no indigenous people, only an environment and perhaps microbial life to consider. So our moral focus shifted to preserving those environments scientifically and not contaminating them recklessly. Robotic probes had tried to ensure Mars was mostly sterile before humans arrived, but people inevitably carry Earth microbes on their skin and clothes. Thus, protocols were in place. Mars habitats would be isolated and waste sterilized. The search for Martian life would continue, so that if we found even a hint of native biology, we could adapt our plans to avoid harming it. Some advocated that certain zones of Mars be designated off-limits, planetary parks for science only. We would, in effect, impose a principle of do no harm as much as possible, extending respect even to a potentially lifeless but scientifically precious world. Within human society, there was an understanding that those who go to space carry the responsibility of all humans. Early Mars settlers took oath-like pledges reminiscent of explorers' vows. They knew their actions could set precedents. If they claimed territory or behaved recklessly, it could sow conflict. Thus, international treaties were reaffirmed and extended. No nation can own celestial bodies. Mars and beyond belong to all humankind. Any colony would ideally operate under a framework that included many nations or a new collective governance. But how to govern a colony millions of kilometers away? Some on Earth fearfully imagined a Mars that one day might declare independence and spark Mars versus Earth tensions. Others were optimistic, picturing inclusive political structures, a kind of United Nations of space, where Earth nations and off-world colonies sat together. In any case, these concerns made one thing clear. Living in space isn't just engineering, it's society building. We would need new laws and norms. If a child was born on Mars, what citizenship would they have? Earthling or Martian? Early on, it was decided they'd hold the citizenship of their parents' home nation, or perhaps a special Earth passport, until Martian self-governance developed. And what about justice in space? An international space treaty was expanded to cover crimes or disputes, a framework where Earth-based courts might have jurisdiction until colonies set up their own legal systems consistent with human rights. Who gets to shape all this? By necessity, those who went first shaped much of it. Their successes or failures would influence public opinion and policy. Early Mars crews and space habitat residents made a point of broad transparency, broadcasting their daily lives, the joys and struggles, back to Earth. This open diary of colonization helped Earth's public feel invested and included, not left behind. It wasn't us and them, but rather we are doing this together, step by step. When a crew member on Mars expressed homesickness looking at Earth in their sky, or two settlers in a moon base had a personal conflict they needed to resolve, those stories, shared carefully, humanized them. People on Earth realized these pioneers were not superheroes or distant gods. They were people, fallible, relatable, courageous people, just in a very novel situation. The ethics of selection gradually gave way to the ethics of integration. As people began living off Earth for longer, how would they remain part of humanity's shared culture? The lines of communication, education, and art became crucial. Earth institutions began to include off-world history in curricula as soon as colonies formed. A child on Earth might learn about the first Martian colony the way they learned about ancient Rome, taking pride in it as part of human heritage. Meanwhile, children on Mars or the Moon studied Earth's cultures and languages deeply, knowing that is where humanity grew from. There was a deliberate effort to prevent an us versus them mentality from forming. Still, differences emerged with time and new questions. If a Mars-born person found Earth's gravity too heavy to live comfortably, would they be considered disabled on Earth or simply adapted to Mars? If an orbital habitat chose a novel form of government, say, a direct digital democracy in their small community, would Earth nations recognize it? As human society diversified into different gravities and environments, tolerance and pluralism had to expand as well. We had to accept that human could encompass someone who's never felt 1G, or whose calendar was 24.6 hours long, or whose night sky lacked a moon but featured the rings of Saturn. In those early shaping years, deciding who got to live in outer space and under what rules was guided by something profound, a sense that in space, we must represent the best of us. Perhaps that was optimistic, but it was a self-fulfilling aspiration. The people who chose to leave Earth largely did so out of idealism and scientific passion. They carried that idealism with them. They named their new habitats things like Harmony or Shackleton after explorers, or gave them names from many languages to reflect unity. They drafted charters echoing the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, ensuring that regardless of the strange new circumstances, fundamental human dignity was upheld. Mistakes happened. No society, new or old, is perfect. But a conscious effort was made not to repeat historical injustices in this fresh arena. For example, when corporations attempted to monopolize asteroid mining zones or patent essential space resources, international bodies and public outcry pushed back, crafting agreements, like updated outer space treaties, to treat these resources as the common heritage of mankind. Space belongs to all humanity was not just a slogan, it was written into policy. There was no space police to enforce these ideals beyond the reach of Earth, but collective pressure and the moral authority of the international community generally held sway. After all, early space settlements still needed Earth's support, goodwill, and markets. Going rogue was not in their interest. Thus, through fits and starts, humanity navigated the ethical landscape of becoming multiplanetary. The story of who lived in outer space became, ultimately, a story of all of us. In time, millions might live off-world, but in those first few decades it was dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. Each one of them was aware they were a representative. When the first baby was born on the Moon, the parents allowed a short live transmission of the child's first cry. People around the globe cheered and wept in unison. It was as if a member of every family had been born out there. When the first Martian settlement held a vote to elect a local council, Earth media broadcast it as a global event, democracy's first off-world election. Such moments were celebrated not as alien, but as extensions of human civilization. By the time orbital habitats and Mars cities were truly self-sustaining, the question, who gets to live in outer space, had evolved. It was no longer just about selection or privilege. It became about preparation and opportunity. Schools worldwide began to tell children that moving to space or another planet was a viable option in their future, something to aspire to, just like any career. What do you want to be when you grow up? Might now be answered by a child in Nairobi or New York with a Mars agronomist or an orbital architect. To make that real, scholarships and training programs emerged so that not only the wealthiest nations' citizens could go to space. Space agencies formed international astronaut corps for planetary missions, pulling talent from a broad pool. If space was to be humanity's new frontier, then humanity as a whole would have a stake in it. In parallel, those who ventured outward never forgot their roots. Most spacefarers developed an even stronger environmental ethic for Earth after seeing it from afar. Many who returned from assignments on Mars or the Moon became powerful advocates for protecting Earth's ecosystems, armed with tech they'd developed for closed-loop survival in space, efficient recyclers, indoor farming techniques that could help communities on Earth live more sustainably. Far from escaping Earth's problems, they often returned with fresh perspective to help solve them. Thus, the relationship became symbiotic. Earth nurtured space settlements with people, culture, and supplies. Space, in turn, gave Earth innovations, perspective, and hope. It wasn't always smooth. There were episodes of public doubt, moments of tragedy, an accident in space that claimed lives, prompting reflection on risk and purpose, and periodic criticisms that money spent on Mars could be better spent on earthly hunger or disease. But the momentum, once started, was hard to stop. The dream was too potent, the potential too great. In one telling episode, a private consortium announced plans to establish a luxury space resort only for the ultra-wealthy, essentially a gilded orbital refuge. The backlash was swift and fierce. Media and citizens alike condemned it as against the spirit of humanity's shared journey. The consortium rebranded the project, adding scientific facilities and opening some spots for researchers and students, making it not just a pleasure dome, but a part of the collective effort. The lesson: humanity would not embrace a future in which space was a lifeboat for the few or a playground of privilege. If we go to space to thrive, we go as a human family, messy, diverse, striving to be just. By the time the first multi-family habitats in orbit and the first Martian towns were thriving, the ethics of selection had transformed into something akin to immigration on Earth. There were requirements and processes, but the guiding principle was that anyone could aspire to go if they prepared and contributed. Perhaps a day will come when leaving Earth is as routine as moving to another country, motivated by jobs, adventure, or the simple desire for a different sky. If that day arrives, we will remember the ethos established when the Enterprise was fragile, that we are caretakers of each other, whether Earthborn or spaceborn, and that we owe each other empathy across the void. Those first brave souls in off-world colonies set the tone, one of cooperation, equality, and awe. They wrote in their journals about feeling like tenants of the solar system, all of us, and hoping their work would benefit everyone, not just themselves. One early Mars settler, standing under the pale pink Martian sky, said during an interview, "Mars is not a refuge or a fortress for a few. It's a new chapter for civilization. We're here to open the door for everyone else, whenever they're ready." It was a sentiment that resonated widely on Earth and became a guiding star in space policy. Now, looking back on those times from our vantage in the future, we see it wasn't perfect, but somehow we avoided the worst pitfalls. The question of who gets to live in outer space gradually shifted from the hands of a few gatekeepers to a more organic flow of migration. And as more people went, the line between us on Earth and them in space blurred. They stepped into the void, armed not only with technology, but with a mandate to uphold humanity's shared values in each new habitat. And so, as the first crews settled into their permanent spaceborne homes, they carried with them the hopes and principles of the whole Earth. We became one community spread across many places. With that unity in diversity, we carried forward into the following decades, ready to face the practical and philosophical challenges of actually building lives beyond our home world. Morning on the space station does not arrive with the sun. Sunrise and sunset happen every 45 minutes here, but by the schedule set in Houston and Moscow. The astronaut glances at their wristwatch. It's morning by agreement, though outside the window the Earth below is bathed in midday light. They float over to a small compartment, about the size of a telephone booth, which serves as their sleeping quarters. Inside, a sleeping bag is pinned to the wall. Last night, they drifted into slumber, zipped inside that bag, kept from free-floating by straps. In microgravity, there's no tossing and turning in bed. Every surface can be a bed if you let it. Some nights they simply tethered themselves and closed their eyes, letting their arms float upward in the simian hunch posture that bodies naturally take without gravity, almost like a fetus curled in amniotic fluid. It's oddly comfortable, sleeping as if back in the womb of weightlessness. Emerging from the sleeping bag, the astronaut performs a familiar dance with morning hygiene. There is no running water. A blob of water squeezed from a pouch hovers in the air until caught on a washcloth. They rub it over their face and scalp. No rinse shampoo helps keep their short-cropped hair clean. An electric razor floats at hand, but shaving must be done carefully near an air vent that can suck in the clippings, lest tiny hairs wander into instruments or lungs. There's no shower to stand under. One couldn't even stand, and water would spray in every direction. Instead, cleanliness is maintained through sponge baths with wet towels. It's a reminder that even the simplest Earth routines must be reinvented out here. Dressed in a fresh shirt and pants, clothes are worn a few days, then packed away as trash to be incinerated on re-entry. Since washing machines are a luxury for another time, the astronaut makes their way to the galley for breakfast. Breakfast might be scrambled eggs, in powdered form, revived with a squirt of water, or perhaps a pouch of yogurt and dried fruit. Food in space is a careful affair. Every morsel must be contained. In front of them, they velcro their meal packet to the table so it doesn't drift. Using a small utensil, which sticks magnetically to the tray between bites, they savor the food. It's not gourmet, but the engineers have come a long way from the paste in tubes that early cosmonauts endured. There are dozens of menu items now: thermostabilized stews, freeze-dried fruits, even occasional treats like a radiated smoked turkey or a brownie for dessert. Still, something is different. Microgravity has caused fluid to shift upward in their body, subtly congesting their sinuses as if with a mild cold. With a stuffy head, taste is blunted. Many astronauts crave hot sauce or strong spices to lend zing to these meals. A beloved item on the station is a bottle of pepper sauce. A few drops, carefully applied and stirred so they don't float off as burning droplets, can make rehydrated eggs taste almost like home. As they eat, they gaze out a nearby viewport at Earth. Drifting over the Middle East now, golden deserts and a ribbon of the Nile, this view never ceases to captivate. This daily communion with Earth below is more than recreation. For many spacefarers, it's a mental lifeline. They might spot their country, even their hometown, in a single sweep of the eye. It brings perspective and comfort, a reminder that though they live in the sky, they remain connected to humanity on the ground. Breakfast done, the astronaut cleans up, stowing wrappers and pouches for disposal. Now the workday begins. On the schedule, maintaining the life support systems and conducting several science experiments. But before any heavy work, there's a crucial daily task: exercise. In orbit, without gravity's pull, the human body begins to change in subtle and not so subtle ways. Our bones and muscles evolve to work constantly against weight. Take that away, and they start to weaken at an alarming rate. Already, after some weeks in space, our astronaut has experienced it. Legs thinning a bit, muscles not used for posture starting to shrink. Without intervention, an astronaut can lose as much as 1% of their bone density per month, a rate of loss that would be the envy of osteoporosis on Earth, and their muscles, especially in the legs and back, can atrophy just as quickly. So each day, they dedicate about 2 hours to vigorous exercise. The astronaut moves to a corner of the station where a strange-looking treadmill is mounted on the wall, though in microgravity, wall and floor mean little. They buckle into a harness that straps them to the treadmill with elastic bands. Otherwise, they would float away with each step. Once secured, they begin to run. It feels at first like running with a heavy backpack, necessary to simulate the feeling of weight on their feet. Around them, Equipment rattles softly with each footfall on the moving belt, a drumbeat in the quiet station. Despite the inconvenience, the astronaut welcomes the exertion. Their heart pumps faster, their muscles strain and sweat, and for a moment, they feel almost normal, almost back on Earth jogging in a park. Yet a drop of sweat breaks free from their brow and floats before their eyes, a glittering reminder that this is not Earth. They catch it with a towel and continue. After cardiovascular exercise, they switch to the resistance machine, a marvel of engineering called ARED, Advanced Resistive Exercise Device. It mimics weightlifting through vacuum cylinders that provide adjustable resistance. Here, they lift weights to keep upper body and core muscles strong. They do squats and deadlifts of a sort, the device pulling against them as they push. The strain on muscles feels satisfying. This routine will, with luck, ensure that when they return to Earth's gravity one day, they won't collapse under their own weight. Without these measures, returning astronauts could struggle to walk or stand as their reconditioned bodies re-encounter gravity. Even with diligent workouts, many astronauts still need help standing when they first land. Muscles tremble and blood pressure can drop, causing dizziness until their cardiovascular system readapts. Exercise also helps in other ways. It gets the blood flowing, mitigating the fluid shifts that cause puffy faces and skinny bird legs. In microgravity, without gravity drawing fluids down, blood and water in the body move upward. Faces swell slightly. Sometimes, astronauts look like they have a constant mild sinus congestion, while their legs, not bearing weight, lose fluid and slim down. They joke about the puffy head, bird legs syndrome. But behind the joke is a real concern. That upward fluid shift can increase pressure inside the skull and on the back of the eyes. Some astronauts, especially on long missions, have experienced changes in their vision, flattened eyeballs and swollen optic nerves, a condition being studied closely. Doctors call it spaceflight-associated neuroocular syndrome, and it's one of many puzzles we must solve for longer space living. Our astronaut diligently performs extra eye exams when asked, pressing their face against a device that uses ultrasound to image their retinas. They know that the very shape of their eyes might be altered by this weightless life. With exercise done, they towel off and float to the next task. A science experiment awaits, growing little plants in a microgravity greenhouse. They open a small chamber where delicate sprouts of lettuce are thriving under pink LED lights. Tended carefully, these greens will be part of the crew's diet in a few weeks. A welcome crunch of fresh salad amid packaged foods. More importantly, they are a test of sustaining life off Earth. The astronaut injects water into the roots and checks sensors. The sight of the tiny leaves brings a smile. Even a bit of green, a bit of life from soil, profoundly lifts the sterile mechanical atmosphere of the station. It reminds them of a garden on Earth, and for a moment, the station feels more homely. This quiet interlude with the plants is broken by an alarm, just a scheduled reminder for a medical check. It's time to collect a blood sample for a study on how the immune system behaves in space. Microgravity affects nearly every bodily system. The immune system can get a bit confused. Some astronauts find latent viruses like shingles reactivating under the stress and altered physiology of spaceflight. Blood and saliva samples help scientists track these changes. With practiced efficiency, the astronaut draws a vial of their own blood, labels it, and stores it in a freezer that will keep it for return to Earth analysis. They make a log entry on a computer describing how they feel today. Mood and cognition are also under the microscope. Spacefarers often report a certain euphoria at first, the so-called overview effect of seeing Earth as one unified entity can fill one with unexpected peace and planetary love. But beyond that, as days turn to weeks, they experience the full spectrum of human emotion. There are days of excitement, days of monotony, moments of irritation or longing for home, bursts of camaraderie and laughter with crewmates, and quiet periods of introspection staring out the window. They might joke over dinner and music one night, and the next quietly miss the feeling of wind and rain on their face. In the close quarters of the station, about the internal volume of a large house, but much of that filled with equipment, privacy is scarce. Each crew member has their little sleeping nook, but otherwise they are almost always within earshot of each other. Minor conflicts can arise. A mislaid tool or a forgotten checklist can spark annoyance that must be carefully managed. They are professionals, trained to cooperate, but they are human too. On Earth, one could walk away after an argument. Here, there's nowhere else to go. So communication and patience become their own vital life support systems. Our astronaut scribbles a candid thought in a private journal. Dreamed of the forest behind my childhood home last night. Could smell the pines. Woke up floating. These journals are encouraged by psychologists. They give crew members a safe outlet and provide researchers insight after the mission into their mental states over time. It's all part of learning how isolation and confinement affect humans when it's not just a week-long mission, but months and eventually years. The workday continues. Maintenance is constant. Filters need cleaning. Devices must be recalibrated. The station is like a small town with a never-ending to-do list. Air and water systems to check, communications gear to update, scientific apparatus to tend. In between tasks, the astronaut steals glances out the window. The station passes over the Pacific now. A broad swath of ocean shimmers under the sun. In the distance, a curl of a tropical cyclone draws their eye. A massive weather system silently swirling. They snap a photo. Capturing Earth's wonders is a favorite pastime and also an important science activity. Those photos help track environmental changes, and, for the astronaut, taking them is a form of artistic expression and connection to home. By late afternoon, the crew reconvenes for a planning meeting with mission control. A disembodied voice from home, running through tomorrow's agenda and receiving updates about today's. Though separated by 400 kilometers of void, the astronauts and ground teams form a single community. They even share jokes over the loop. Mission controllers know the value of morale. One controller reads up a bit of news from Earth. A major sports finals result. A popular song topping the charts. A holiday message from a school. These little things mean the world to those off the world. It is a reminder that life on Earth flows on, and they are still part of it in spirit. Evening comes. Again, only by the clock. Since out the window, one might see the sun dipping toward a horizon and then rising again in a span of an hour and a half. The crew gathers for dinner. They drift around a makeshift table, securing their food packets with Velcro. Tonight, it's something resembling stew and rice, with peach cobbler for dessert, a special treat sent up in a cargo ship. They clink their plastic water pouches in a toast. To another successful day in space, someone quips. Laughter fills the module, echoes soft against the metallic walls. This simple camaraderie is as vital as oxygen. They share stories. Perhaps an old astronaut recounts a tale of Mir or the space shuttle days. A younger crewmate might talk about their children back home, drawing a picture of Mummy floating in space. After dinner, they indulge in a rare pleasure: music. One crew member brings out a guitar that has been aboard the station for years, strumming it in the air. The acoustics in the cramped node are surprisingly good. Our astronaut closes their eyes and listens as a familiar melody, perhaps a rendition of Space Oddity or a favorite classical piece, reverberates through the station. In microgravity, the notes hang and gently fade without the weight of gravity to dampen the instrument. It's a gentle concert for 6 souls drifting above the Earth. Some quietly hum or sing along. Others tap their feet against a handrail in time, or they would if feet stayed on the floor. For a moment, they could be in a living room on Earth, friends enjoying music after a day's work. But the view, the view from the cupola, betrays their extraordinary locale. The Earth at night, with city lights twinkling like constellations of their own, sweeps past under a veil of atmospheric glow. Stars beyond shine cold and steady, with no twinkle here without air, a bed of diamonds on black velvet. As the music winds down, each person drifts to their own evening ritual. One might call their family via an IP phone link, speaking to a spouse or child, the signal bouncing through satellites to bridge Earth and sky. The time delay is negligible at this low orbit, making the conversation feel almost normal, except for the odd remark like, "I saw a beautiful sunrise an hour ago," while family replies, "But it's still afternoon here." Another astronaut might watch a movie on a laptop, floating in their sleeping quarters, a bit of escapism that momentarily transports them to a gravity-bound world through fiction. Our astronaut decides to write an email or two, one to an old friend, describing the thrill of seeing lightning storms from above, another to mission planners, with a suggestion about improving the plant watering system. They know that to truly live in space one day, the little things will matter. The ergonomics of a zero-G watering can, the recipe for a crumb-free bread that doesn't make a mess. Astronauts prefer tortillas for this reason. Life out here is a mosaic of such details, each addressed through trial and experience. Finally, it's time for bed. They retreat to the sleeping nook, where a small photograph of their family is velcroed to the wall next to a plush toy floating as a tiny guardian. As they zip into the sleeping bag, they feel the day's experiences gently replaying in mind, the effort of exercise, the wonder of the Earth's panorama, the quiet pride in another day off Earth. They know their calcium supplements and workouts will help keep their bones strong, that the filtered air they breathe is keeping them alive, that countless systems hum in the background to simulate an Earth-like bubble. It's a delicate equilibrium. Earlier, they had to replace a CO2 scrubber canister because carbon dioxide was creeping up. Removing CO2 is literally a matter of life or death in an enclosed habitat. Such tasks become routine here, as crucial as refilling a car's gas tank on Earth. In their mind, they ponder the facts of their own body. Their heart has gotten a bit lazy in microgravity, not pumping blood uphill as it once did. It may have shrunk slightly in muscle mass over the mission. Their bones in the lower body are shedding calcium, some of which ends up in their urine, hence the risk of kidney stones, mitigated by staying hydrated and taking potassium citrate. They recall being part of an experiment where ultrasound tracked how the spine's vertebrae separate slightly in microgravity, making them a few centimeters taller temporarily, but often giving them backaches from stretched ligaments. These are all pieces of the new normal for humans in space. None of it has been insurmountable so far, but as we contemplate living years, perhaps lifetimes, off Earth, these issues loom large. We would need artificial gravity or other innovations if humans are to live and raise children beyond Earth for generations. Our bodies, as they are now, are tuned for Earth's pull. With a chuckle, the astronaut remembers a line from training. In space, even your tears won't fall. Crying in microgravity leads to teardrops clinging to the eyes in stinging globules until wiped away. Anger, joy, sorrow, all take on new dimension when expressed in an alien environment. They haven't cried up here yet, though some nights they have felt a deep longing when thinking of loved ones. But those tears, if they came, would remind them that living out here means redefining even the most human of acts. They dim the lights of their compartment. Outside, another orbital night has begun. The station moves into Earth's shadow, and the cabin windows show an incredible starscape with no sunlight to outshine it. From the sleeping compartment, our astronaut can't see that view, but they know it's there. They whisper softly to themselves a good night to Earth, and a good night to the universe beyond the thin walls. Here, in this metal cocoon, a human being lives, not as a visitor in space, but as a resident, however temporary. It's a life filled with both magic and mundane, as any life is. Sunrise over the ocean one moment, cleaning an air filter the next. As they drift to sleep, their body relaxes into weightlessness, spine lengthened, arms floating free. In the coming days, new challenges will arise. Perhaps a minor equipment failure to fix, or an experiment yielding surprising data about how microbes behave in microgravity. But for now, in this moment of repose, the astronaut embodies proof that humans can indeed live, eat, sleep, work, and find meaning beyond the Earth. The station is a small world unto itself, a testbed for human life in space. And yet, this is just one small step toward answering the larger question. Living on a station a few hundred kilometers from Earth is one thing, comforting in its proximity. The crew sees Earth every day, has quick communication with mission control, and can return home in an emergency aboard spacecraft docked at the station. The next phase of this grand human project will be far more daring, to live on the Moon, on Mars, or voyaging in deep space, where Earth is a tiny dot and help is distant. As our astronaut drifts into slumber, they dream of the future. A future where the lessons learned in this orbital home will carry humans farther, to new worlds, and perhaps one day to permanent homes away from the cradle of Earth. One day, not very far in the future, an astronaut much like the one on our station will step out of a lander and onto the surface of Mars. In the thin, cold air of that Martian dawn, sky-tinted butterscotch by dust, they will become an alien on an alien land. And yet, they will be home, in a sense, because home is where humans learn to live. Picture it. A small cluster of habitats stands on a flat plain near the foot of a rusty hill. The habitat modules are cylindrical and covered in reddish soil, piled thick for radiation shielding. They are connected by pressurized tunnels, like a string of beads, forming the first human outpost on Mars. Inside one module, a woman wakes from her bunk. She yawns and stretches, feeling the gentle tug of Martian gravity, just over a third of Earth's, enough that she doesn't float, but also enough that she feels light and bouncy. Getting out of bed, she has to be careful not to push off too hard. She's still adjusting to how little effort is needed to move here. It's Sol 45, the 45th Martian day of the mission, and she has work to do. She dresses in a simple jumpsuit and slippers with Velcro, so her feet can grip the metal floors. The lights have come on automatically to simulate an Earth-like day-night cycle, but she knows outside the sun has risen as well. The HAB's life support systems murmur in the background, fans circulating air, pumps moving water. They are her lifeline. Here, if a filter clogs or a circuit fails, it must be fixed swiftly. There is no backup atmosphere outside, only a wayfish CO2-rich air at barely 1% of Earth's pressure. She checks a tablet that shows environmental readouts. Oxygen level normal, CO2 scrubbers nominal, water reserves 85%. Some lost to a small leak last week, but they patched it. Radiation levels are within safe bounds for now, thanks to storm shelters and the soil on the walls. All good for the moment. She floats a moment. Well, not floats, but feels almost as if she could. In Mars's weak gravity, everything is easier to lift. Her own body feels both strong and fragile. Over weeks, her muscles have had to learn a new gait and new exertions. She doesn't feel the constant downward pull she grew up with, and sometimes her inner ear still gets confused, especially when she moves her head too fast. But day by day, she's adapting, becoming a creature of Mars. In the adjacent module, 2 colleagues are already up and about. One is firing up a small stove to warm breakfast, oatmeal made from grain they brought, rehydrated with precious water. On Mars, every drop of water is as valuable as gold. They extract some from the soil and ice and recycle every drop of urine and condensation. Nothing can be wasted if they hope to become self-sufficient. The other colleague is checking on their greenhouse, a bubble-like structure attached to the habitat. Inside, under LED lights, leafy greens and radishes grow in hydroponic trays. The sight of vibrant green plants against the backdrop of red Martian soil through a window is surreal and comforting. Those plants are not just food, they are companions, little living pieces of Earth contributing oxygen and moisture to the habitat and sanity to the crew. After breakfast, the woman suits up for an EVA, extravehicular activity, going outside into the Martian environment. She dons a thick undergarment, then the pressure suit's legs, torso, arms, and helmet, checking seals meticulously. Mars may not be as instantly lethal as the vacuum of space, but its air would still suffocate unprotected in moments, and its dust, if inhaled, could wreak havoc on lungs. She works with her teammate to go through the airlock cycle. With a hiss and a clunk, the outer door opens, and for the first time this week, she steps directly onto Martian soil. Beneath her boots, the ground is a fine, powdery dust mixed with pebbles. Her first steps kick up little puffs that drift lazily down, far slower than on Earth. The landscape around her is otherworldly, yet strangely familiar in some ways. Hills and rocks under a salmon sky. Overhead, the sun is smaller than she's ever seen it, but it still shines brightly, casting sharp shadows in the thin air. Two small moons, Phobos and Deimos, would be visible at certain times, but right now, the morning sky hides them. On other evenings, she has watched Phobos rise and race across the sky in just a few hours, a swift grey speck, and traced Deimos creeping along more languidly. The sight of these tiny moons, once mere names in astronomy books, now familiar companions overhead, always reminds her how different this world is, and yet how it shares with Earth the same celestial poetry, a dance of moons and sun, of day and night. Today's task is to lay more power cables from their nuclear reactor to a new excavation site. They have a compact fission reactor humming a safe distance from the hab, providing steady power day and night, a necessity on a planet where dust storms can linger for months and solar panels might be choked under layers of fine silt. Indeed, a few weeks back, a storm raged for days, turning the sky into a tawny blur. The habitat survived on stored energy and the reactor's steady output, but it was a reminder of how hostile and unpredictable Mars can be. She trundles in her suit toward a half-buried cable spool. Walking in Mars gravity in a spacesuit is an odd shuffle hop, lighter than walking in an Apollo moon suit, 1/6G, where astronauts famously bunny hopped, but still requiring some bounce in the stride to overcome suit stiffness. Behind her golden visor, her eyes scan the ochre terrain. Distant cliffs mark the edge of an ancient crater. To the east, the dawn sun sparkles off something, the ice of a shallow subsurface frost exposed by their drilling, perhaps. Beauty and resources intermix in her engineer's mind. Where there is ice, there is water for life support, for fuel production, maybe even one day for making bricks or concrete. Back inside the main habitat, another crew member monitors her progress via suit telemetry and cameras. Everything in this pioneering base is carefully orchestrated, safety first, through constant communication. However, unlike on the space station, where a call to Houston is instantaneous, communications with Earth now lag and are scheduled. At this moment, Earth is about 12 light minutes away. If she sends a message, a beloved voice from home won't answer for nearly half an hour, if not more. There is no mission control guiding their every move. The crew here have learned to be largely self-reliant, a small tribe of humans on a frontier. They do have scheduled comm windows to transmit data, get news, and consult on big decisions, and yes, to exchange personal messages with loved ones. But the day-to-day operations rest on their shoulders. On Mars, the sense of distance, from Earth, from immediate help, settles in as a serious weight that even the low gravity cannot lift. Yet they are not lonely in the cosmic sense. At night in the hab, when the crew gathers for dinner or a game of cards, they often talk about how connected they still feel. Earth is a bright star in their dusk sky, and the source of voices, albeit delayed, that they hear regularly. They know thousands of people on Earth are following their mission with fascination, that children in classrooms are drawing pictures of them and dreaming of following in their footsteps. The mental support that provides is immense. They carry the hopes of humanity here, which gives them purpose on the hard days. The Martian day, called a sol, is about 40 minutes longer than an Earth day. They've adjusted their schedules gradually to this slightly longer rhythm. Their clocks run on Mars time now. Sunset on Mars, which will come in the early evening local time, is a spectacle of blue hues, dust in the atmosphere causing the sun's light to bend differently than on Earth, so the sky around the setting sun turns a cool blue, while the day sky is butterscotch. She hopes to finish her EVA in time to catch it. On some sols, after the day's work is done, the crew all go out together in their suits, just to stand near the hab and watch the sun dip, sharing a quiet awe. They've jokingly dubbed that ritual Martian sundowners, echoing an Earth tradition, but literally watching the sun down. Moments like that knit their small community together, forming memories that will become the stuff of legends for future Martians. Their plan is to gradually expand this outpost. Already, semi-autonomous robots are piling regolith, Martian soil, into a low berm around the hab as extra shielding and a windbreak. In a few years, new modules will arrive on landing rockets, perhaps an inflatable habitat that can be covered with soil to create a larger living volume. The crew fantasizes about a proper shower or a small centrifuge gym that could simulate Earth gravity for an hour a day. Bit by bit, what started as survival will grow into comfort. They may carve out a proper dining room or an observation cupola with thick glass to gaze at the Martian landscape without a visor in the way. Mars will change them. Physically, if they stay long enough, years, they might experience further bone loss beyond what they had in weightlessness during the journey. But Mars offers something the journey and station did not: partial gravity, which may be enough to keep some bodily systems functioning more normally. Only time and research will tell. They monitor their health constantly, measuring bone density, muscle mass, blood counts to see if cosmic radiation is doing damage at the cellular level. Mars lacks a global magnetic field, and its thin atmosphere gives little shelter from high-energy cosmic rays. Over a long stay, each person accumulates radiation exposure that on Earth might take decades, raising their risk of cancer or other illnesses. Their habitats have water tanks and supply crates lined around sleeping areas to shield them, and there's a storm shelter, a heavily shielded closet, to cram into during solar flares when radiation spikes. Accepting a higher lifetime radiation dose was part of the bargain of coming here, a risk each volunteer understood. Despite the hardships, they also feel the exhilaration of true exploration. Every time they drive their electric rover over untraveled ground or drill into Martian rock for samples that might hold signs of ancient life, they feel like pioneers in the deepest sense. In the evenings, they catalogue findings, perhaps evidence that eons ago a stream flowed near this base, or the discovery of complex organic molecules in the soil. The search for Martian life, past or present, is ongoing and deeply meaningful. If they find even fossils of microbes, it changes humanity's understanding of our place in the universe. They would have neighbors, albeit long dead and microscopic, in the cosmic ocean. For now, Mars has yielded no incontrovertible proof of past life, but hints in certain minerals and patterns keep them looking. Back inside after her EVA, the woman sheds her suit and checks off the tasks accomplished. She and her crewmate managed to lay the new power cable and also inspected a nearby ridge for a potential construction site for additional solar panels. Her muscles ache pleasantly from the effort. She rehydrates and takes a moment to respond to a message from Earth, a delayed email from her mother, full of encouragement and homely gossip. She smiles at the attachment, a photo of the old oak tree in their yard, its branches heavy with summer leaves. It strikes her that on Mars there are no trees, no birds or flowing water, none of the life that makes Earth so endlessly vibrant. If humans are to live here long term, they will have to bring those things in some form. Greenhouses for trees, artificial ponds for fish, Perhaps one day attempts at terraforming portions of the landscape. That is a project for centuries, altering a planet's climate by releasing trapped CO2, planting hardy engineered vegetation, thickening the atmosphere. She wonders if it will ever truly be possible, or if Mars will always require domes and suits. That's not a question she needs to solve today. Today's question was where to run a cable and how to fix a bulky rover wheel. As night falls, the crew of 4 gathers in their central module for dinner. The habitat interior is cozy now. Dimmed lights, the hum of life support, a lullaby of machinery. They trade jokes about the day's minor mishaps, a dropped wrench tumbling down a hill, a computer crash that required a reboot. They also celebrate their wins. The outpost solar array is now fully wired and doubling their energy input on clear days, and they harvested their first ripe Martian-grown tomatoes yesterday, juicy and bright red. That was cause for a little party. They each savored 2 cherry tomatoes, eating them slowly with a pinch of salt, marveling at how something could taste both of Earth and of this new world, perhaps a note of Martian mineral tang in the flavor. Small victories like that keep the mission spirit high. After dinner, they continue a tradition started on Sol 1. Each person shares something they are grateful for or a highlight of the Sol. It might seem a bit sentimental, but it frames each day positively. One says, "I'm grateful the reactor's been running without a hiccup for 2 months." Another adds, "I'm happy I got to see that blue sunset. It was stunning tonight." The woman smiles and says, "I'm grateful for my crewmates. Couldn't have laid that cable without you." It's earnest. Out here, gratitude is as essential as oxygen. They share a laugh and know each other's pick-me-ups. And these moments of reflection keep them grounded psychologically, even on an alien ground. They then gather around a tablet to watch a movie together. A decades-old, Mars-themed film for some humor, laughing at what the filmmakers of the past got wildly wrong or surprisingly right. Outside, Mars is silent and cold under a blanket of stars. Inside, human laughter and the sound of reconstituted popcorn, made from a precious bag of kernels, a treat reserved for special nights, fills the habitat. In this moment, Mars is not just a science experiment or a hostile frontier. It is home, at least for now, for these 4 pioneers. And they think about those who will follow. Already, other crews are training on Earth, and plans are drawn to send larger habitats, more supplies, perhaps the components of a 3D printed brick factory or a greenhouse that can support fruit trees. If these first outposts prove that humans can endure and stay healthy, more settlers will come. Perhaps in a couple of decades, a permanent colony will be established with dozens of people rotating in and out, and some opting to stay longer, building families and communities. A child conceived on Mars, is that even advisable with the radiation and lower gravity? Science hasn't answered that yet. Likely it won't happen until we understand more. The crew sometimes muses about the first Martian baby. They imagine the media frenzy and the debates on Earth about the ethics. But if humanity is to truly live in space, those steps will eventually be taken. Mars is a stepping stone further into the solar system. As they drift to sleep in their bunks, the crew might dream of the great volcano Olympus Mons or the deep canyon Valles Marineris, imagining future explorers trekking those wonders. They might also dream of other frontier outposts being established, perhaps a research camp on the icy plains of Jupiter's moon Europa, or rotating cities in free space as O'Neill envisioned, glittering like new stars in the night. Tonight, Earth is rising for them. Out a small, overhead porthole of the habitat, the Earth appears as a bright, blue-white star climbing above the horizon. It's a reminder that, despite being millions of kilometers away, they are still connected to the cradle of life. They carry a piece of Earth in every breath. The nitrogen-oxygen mix in their hab originated from Earth's air, in every bite of food, grown from Earth seeds or shipped from Earth, and in every beat of their hearts. But with each passing soul, they are also forging something new, a way of life distinctly not earthly. One day, when flights become routine and this base grows into a settlement, a newcomer might land on Mars and see how people have adapted, maybe wearing lighter clothing woven with radiation-proof fabrics, following a slightly shifted circadian rhythm, celebrating new Martian holidays, speaking slang that blends Earth languages with terms born of this soil. The history books will mark these early years of Mars habitation as the turning point when humans became a multi-planet species. But for the crew living it, it's less grandiose. It's a series of daily chores, challenges, and joys. It's checking suits, fixing water recyclers, planting seeds, and telling stories under an unfamiliar sky. It's science fiction made mundane and thus made real. They understand that everything they do, from how they deal with boredom to how they maintain their rover, paves the road for those who come next. In the quiet of the Martian night, one of the crew steps into the airlock's intermediate chamber, the porch, just to look through a porthole at the stars. The Milky Way's band is visible here with stunning clarity, unmarred by any city lights or even much atmosphere. It strikes her, all that we have done, from living on a space station to planting our flag on the moon to now building a haven on Mars, is but the opening chapter of a much larger tale. The universe is vast, yet here on this red planet we stand, proof that humanity can step into that vastness and hold our own. She presses her gloved hand against the glass, as if reaching toward those stars. Perhaps one day, humans will go further than Mars, outward to the moons of Jupiter or beyond, carrying our homes with us. It sounds like fantasy, but so once did the scene outside her window, an earthling gazing up at the cosmos from the surface of Mars. She whispers softly, "Good night, Mars," before retreating inside. In that moment, Mars is no longer just a distant point of light or a mythic god of war. It's a place where someone can say goodnight and mean it, a place that has listeners to hear the whisper. In claiming that simple ritual, humanity quietly stakes its true claim. We belong among the worlds of the sky, not as conquerors, but as gardeners, caregivers, and students learning the ways of new soils. Even as some of us make homes on the moon and Mars, others choose to build homes free in space itself. Far ahead in time, picture an immense cylinder floating at a stable point between Earth and the moon. It is 20 miles long and 4 miles in diameter, rotating slowly once about its axis every couple of minutes. From a distance, it gleams with sunlight on its hull and the glint of giant mirrors angled along its length. This is an O'Neill cylinder, a human-made world in space, an Island 3 colony as dreamed of in the 1970s, finally realized perhaps a century hence. Now, shift perspective. We are no longer the astronaut in a cramped station, nor the pioneer in a Mars habitat. We are an inhabitant of this grand space city. We stand on a grassy hillside under a warm afternoon sun. Yet that sun is not a fiery ball fixed in a blue sky. It's coming from a mirror overhead, reflecting light from outside into the cylinder. We look up, and instead of blue sky fading to a horizon, we see the landscape curving up and over into the sky itself. Far, far above, on the opposite inner curve of the cylinder, there are other hills, forests, and even a sparkling lake, all hanging upside down from our vantage point. It is disorienting at first, but in this world, up is relative. The centrifugal force of the rotating habitat creates an artificial gravity, pulling everyone and everything toward the inner surface. The people living here walk on the inner skin of a giant spinning can, and what's above their heads is not air. Air fills the cylinder, held by its sealed shell, but the terrain on the other side of their world. We walk along a path through a field of wildflowers. Bees are buzzing. Real bees, descendants of those brought from Earth to pollinate crops in the colonies' farms. Butterflies flit, and a small child runs past chasing one, laughter echoing. It smells like Earth here, rich soil, flowering trees, a hint of ocean breeze coming from a large saltwater reservoir that serves as a seaside for the colony's inhabitants. How did an ocean breeze get here? The engineers were clever. They built a mini sea connected to a lake stocked with fish and plankton, and giant fans circulate moist air to create a microclimate. There are even manufactured clouds drifting under the sky, really just the central axis of the cylinder, where weightlessness reigns and where condensation can form and hover. It's a careful balance of technology and nature, a vast terrarium managed by both AI and human ecologists to keep the environment stable and Earth-like. As we walk, we pass farmland, neat rows of wheat and corn that rustle in an artificial breeze, temperature and airflow regulated to simulate a gentle wind. There are fruit orchards too, and we spot people on ladders picking apples and pears. They wave. Perhaps we know them, because in a community of a few 100,000, people still form tight neighborhoods. This cylinder essentially holds the population of a small city, but spread over an interior surface area of 500 square miles, partitioned into alternating bands of habitat land and window. Ah, the windows. Stretching along sections of the cylinder are enormous strips of transparent material. Through one such strip, we see the blackness of space and a sliver of Earth far away. But those strips are currently covered by mirrors angled to let in sunshine. The mirrors outside catch sunlight and direct it through these windows, simulating a day-night cycle as they tilt. Right now, the mirrors are fully open. A bright noon floods the habitat. Later, they will angle shallower, dimming the light to an orange dusk for a few hours, then close entirely to create night. During the night period, small lamps on the cylinder's central hub mimic the gentle glow of stars, so that residents still have the psychological comfort of a starry sky, though some of those stars are actually other habitats visible through the windows, or distant spacecraft moving like slow meteors. We stroll into a town. It looks charmingly familiar, a mix of architectural styles. Here, a pagoda-like community center with solar panels disguised in its ornate roof tiles. There, a cluster of homes with porches and gardens climbing the walls. One building has a mural painted on its side. It depicts the history of this colony's creation. Scenes of robot miners on an asteroid extracting metals, of huge space cranes assembling the cylinder in orbit, of the first families moving in and planting the first tree. That tree, a great oak, stands in the center of town now, its branches spread wide, casting dappled shade on a cobblestone square. Under the oak, a market is in progress. People of all ages browse stalls. One sells strawberries and melons grown in the colony. Another has handmade furniture crafted from colony-grown bamboo. There's music playing, a duo with a violin and a strange new instrument that produces electronic harmonies. The tune is lively. Children chase each other, bounding higher than they would on Earth, because here the gravity is set to about 0.9 g, enough to feel normal, but just a touch lighter to ease strain on the body and perhaps allow a bit more spring in the step. A teacher is leading a group of students through the market, perhaps on a field trip. We overhear her pointing out how the colony recycles everything. This plastic was once packaging that came from Earth and has been reused to make these garden pots, she says. The kids nod. They've grown up with closed-loop living. They know water is recycled endlessly, that yesterday's shower might become tomorrow's soup broth after passing through filters, and perhaps the colony's constructed wetlands, where plants and microbes help purify it. They find it ordinary that the air is monitored by sensors and adjusted by algae tanks that soak up extra CO2 and release oxygen. The management of life support is as invisible to them as the work of their own lungs and kidneys, just another set of organs at the city scale. As the afternoon wanes, we make our way toward one end of the cylinder, where a great window is uncovered, offering a view out into space. In the distance, we see the crescent Earth. It is smaller than we remember, but heartbreakingly beautiful still. A few freighters, uncrewed cargo ships, are visible as tiny glints moving to or from Earth, carrying goods and perhaps new immigrants. Nearby, another habitat cylinder floats, a twin city in space. Maybe they trade with each other or have a friendly sports rivalry. Indeed, they do have sports here. Tomorrow there's a zero-gravity acrobatics competition at the Axis. The central hub, where rotation cancels out gravity, has an open gym where people can float and play 3D sports that would make Earthlings gasp with envy. A young couple sits at the observation area, sketching the Earth and Moon through the huge window. Behind them, on a bench, an older man with AR glasses reads the news that spans multiple worlds. He's reading about a scientific breakthrough at a research station orbiting Titan, and an art exhibition opening in this very colony's cultural center, featuring sculptures that incorporate Martian basalt and terrestrial marble. The flow of commerce and culture across space has grown rich. There's even talk of a new cuisine developing among space habitats, a fusion of Earth traditions with novel crops grown in microgravity farms. As the sun mirrors begin to shift toward evening, the colony's internal sky changes hue. The bright daylight softens to a golden hour glow. Long shadows stretch from buildings and trees. One might forget for a moment that we're in a spinning cylinder and feel instead like we're in a valley on Earth at sunset. Families head home for dinner. Some ride bicycles along the colony's main loop road, banked subtly to account for the curve. There are few cars here. Transport is mostly walking, biking, or small electric carts. Distances aren't vast, and the environment is enclosed. In the air, a few personal drones zip by, delivering groceries from the market to homes. One drone passes overhead, carrying a freshly baked loaf of bread from the bakery. Baking in a cylinder had unique challenges initially, like ensuring the ventilation could handle bursts of hot air and the risk of floating crumbs. Hence, bread is often slightly more moist or made in self-contained loaves. But the smell of that bread wafts through the market and makes us hungry. We stroll by the bakery itself, and the baker, a stout woman with flour on her apron, offers us a sample of sourdough. We taste it. Delicious, made from wheat grown in the colony's fields, yeast cultures that came from Earth decades ago, water recycled thousands of times. Yet it tastes like home. That's the marvel. Space habitats like this allow people to carry home with them, to construct an environment where the psychological stresses of alienness are greatly reduced compared to, say, Mars or the Moon. In the early days of space settlement, people debated whether to settle planets or build free-floating habitats. In our scenario, humanity chose both. Planets like Mars offer raw materials, scientific discovery, and the romance of standing on another world. But habitats like this cylinder offer customizable Earth-like conditions anywhere we choose to put them, be it in Earth orbit, at a Lagrange point, or even mobile colonies that could migrate slowly between planets. They were built from the bounty of the asteroids. A single metallic asteroid provided the iron, nickel, and other metals to forge the structure. Lunar mines provided aluminum and silicon for the glass and electronics. Comets or icy moons provided water for oceans and air. They were assembled in space by swarms of robots and human workers over years. Each one was a tremendous investment of will and wealth. But once built, each became a self-sustaining cradle of life, expanding humanity's living space without being limited to planetary surfaces. In the colony's library, a building that might remind one of a grand university library on Earth, though its dome is clearly shaped to hold pressure, we find a section dedicated to Earth literature about space. On terminals, few physical books exist here, aside from symbolic ones. Most are digital for weight reasons. One could read the dreams of O'Neill, von Braun, and others from centuries earlier, and marvel at how ideas turn to blueprints, turn to reality. Some visitors from Earth are said to weep when they first arrive and walk under these artificial skies, overwhelmed by the achievement and the strangeness of an Earth-like bubble in the void. For inhabitants born here, it's simply the world they know, as normal as Earth is to Earthborn. Evening in the cylinder brings community gatherings. Tonight, there's a concert in the park near one end cap, the circular end of the cylinder, which has large windows that, when not shuttered, show the stars at the sky of that end of the world. Under twinkling lampposts, colonists listen to a string quartet play, some dancing in the grass under the gentle glow of simulated twilight. Fireflies. Yes, someone introduced fireflies here for sheer beauty, and they're carefully managed. Dot the air with little green sparks, laughter, clinking glasses of perhaps a space-made wine, grapes grown hydroponically in a dedicated vineyard module, aged in a barrel using wood imported from Earth. A novelty, but they do it. Conversations about art and science, about family and plans for expansion. All these fill the mild evening air. In one circle, an excited engineer describes a new project, a Bernal sphere habitat to be positioned in orbit around Saturn, where colonists can study the rings up close and tap the resources of the Saturn system. Another person says their cousin is moving to Mars to join a terraforming research team. He's proud, but says he personally prefers the controlled environment here. Mars is amazing, but I like my gravity at 1G and my air nice and thick, he jokes. As we wander away from the crowd up a slight hill, gravity lightens a bit, moving closer to the axis. We find a small observation bubble where one can float in microgravity and look out. We push off and drift into this bubble, tethered so we don't float away. Here, away from the pull of the spinning floor, we experience weightlessness again. Through the clear bubble, we see our habitat curving around us, a huge arc of illuminated land against the backdrop of space. Beyond it, stars and the glowing band of the Milky Way. Off to one side, the Earth and Moon system glints. In another direction, a faint reddish spark that is Mars, and maybe, with squinted eyes, the glint of one of the colonies orbiting it. We reflect. Humanity now lives in a multitude of places. Some live under alien sunsets on planetary surfaces. Others inside creations like this that marry human engineering with the comfort of Earth's environment. Each choice came with challenges, enormous technical hurdles, ethical questions about who goes and how, and the need to ensure we didn't abandon our home planet even as we expanded outward. Indeed, even now Earth is cherished and protected. Lessons learned from seeing its fragility from space influence how civilization treats the cradle. Many heavy industries have been relocated off Earth to places like this habitat or the Moon's far side, sparing Earth's biosphere from pollution. Space-based solar power stations beam clean energy down to cities, replacing fossil fuels. In turn, Earth provides these colonies with culture, people, and an anchor of meaning. The exchange is constant. Ships travel back and forth carrying immigrants, exports, art, ideas. A soft chime in the habitat signals night time, 11 p.m. by colony time. The mirrors have fully closed now, and only a dim twilight persists from some streetlights and the luminous band of the Milky Way visible through the windows. Many head to their homes, while some night owls and astronomers stay up to enjoy open sky mode. With mirrors closed, through the window strips you can directly see space, and the interior is dark enough for stargazing. For those on the valley floor, the stars appear in long stripes overhead, since the window is a continuous ring around the cylinder. Some even lay on blankets in their yards to watch the constellations, perhaps teaching their children new constellations invented for their unique sky, or pointing out the moving lights of a spacecraft going by. We drift back down from the observation bubble to the ground, or what feels like ground, and feel gravity gently catch hold of us as we near the inner surface. The cylinder's engineering is so seamless that one can almost forget it's rotating. Only the slight Coriolis effect when you drop a ball, or the sight of the world curving up overhead, gives it away. Those who grow up here know no other normal. To them, the idea of an endless sky that doesn't curve around is perhaps unsettling when they visit Earth. For them, being able to travel by floating up to the hub is as ordinary as taking an elevator. They do travel. Commerce and trips between colonies and planets are common. Perhaps tomorrow a passenger ship will depart from a docking port on the end cap, carrying tourists to a resort around the Moon, while another arrives from Earth with new settlers and entrepreneurs excited to start businesses in space. Spacefarers from different habitats visit one another, leading to an intermixing of subcultures, a true spacefaring culture slowly emerging, made of many threads of Earth but woven in new patterns. Standing here, we realize humanity has become something new and yet remains the same. We carry our needs for community, for nature, for meaning, wherever we go. On this rotating world, there are theatres where Shakespeare is performed, with clever wirework for the zero-G scenes, museums preserving memories of Earth's history and the saga of space settlement, festivals that mix Earth holidays with new cosmic ones. Perhaps on Earth Day each year, the colony holds a celebration where everyone dresses in blue and green and gives thanks to the planet that birthed us. Perhaps there's a Founders' Day commemorating when this cylinder first spun up to full rotation and people moved in, an event that kids here learn about as we learned of Plymouth Rock or the first airplane flight. One of the most moving spots in the colony is a memorial garden at one end, where a grove of trees encircles a sculpture honoring those who enabled human space settlement. Names of early astronauts, scientists, visionaries, and even those who lost their lives in accidents are etched in a ring. Colonists sometimes come here to reflect on the journey that led from one fragile world into countless new homes in the cosmos. It's bedtime for most in this cylinder. As lights in house windows wink out along the curving neighborhoods, an observer at one end would see the habitat's inner surface sprinkled by patches of darkness and the glow of a few streetlights, like a mirror image of a star field. One might imagine that this habitat itself is a star, with the people as the living light inside it. We retreat to a guest lodging. Yes, they have hotels in space colonies. Visitors from Earth or other habitats come through regularly. Looking out the window of our room, we see the town below settling into quiet. A dog, brought as an embryo from Earth and raised here, space settlements began to include pets once ecology became stable enough, trots alongside its owner on a late-night walk. The artificial day's warmth dissipates, and a cool night breeze, managed by the habitat's systems, flows through the open window. We lay down and gaze up through a skylight at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there is the original home, Earth, shining over us. And here, in this second home built by human hands, life continues the story that began on that blue cradle. As the habitat gently rotates through the void, carrying its precious cargo of life, one can imagine that from afar, it looks like just another glinting star, yet inside it, humanity thrives. It is one world of our own making among many now awakening across the once empty night. Tomorrow, the sun mirrors will open on schedule, and another day in the life of this space colony will commence. Children going to school, where classes include Orbital Mechanics 101 as a standard subject, farmers tending hydroponic rice paddies, artists painting murals on the cylindrical sky, scientists conducting microgravity experiments up near the hub, engineers fine-tuning the habitat's rotation or planning expansions for new residents, and perhaps a spaceship departing to start a new colony somewhere further. This normalcy is extraordinary. What was once science fiction is now daily life. Leaving this colony and our reverie of it behind, one cannot help but feel optimistic that there is hardly any limit now to where humans can go. If we can create an Earth-like haven in the void here, we can do so near other planets, around other stars, carrying the torch of life with us. The cylinder habitat stands as proof. We are not confined to the lands nature gave us. We can build new ones, responsibly and beautifully, and flourish within them. Humanity stands at a threshold, one foot planted firmly on our homeworld, and the other stepping into the cosmos. In floating above Earth, we asked, can we live in outer space? The journey we've imagined, from the first astronauts in fragile capsules, to researchers in orbiting labs, to pioneers on Mars, to entire cities spinning among the stars, answers with a resounding yes. Yes, we can live out here. But more than that, we can find a way to not just exist, but to truly belong in space, to make it home. In doing so, we have been forced to grow. We had to develop technologies to feed and shelter ourselves far from any natural haven. And those technologies taught us greater respect for the closed-loop life system of Earth as well. We had to confront ethical questions, ensuring that as we venture outward, We do so as equals, avoiding the colonial sins of our past, not carving up new worlds, but engaging with them responsibly. Perhaps we wrote new spacefaring charters as we went, agreements that no one can exclusively claim a world, that Mars and beyond must be settled in peace, that the vacuum of space is a commons to be cared for. In our better timeline, we learned these lessons. We made space not a Wild West for a few, but a garden for all, tended with foresight. Living in space has changed us in unexpected ways. It has broadened our identity. When the first people born off Earth come of age, humanity will have to decide, are they still fully Earthling or something new? In truth, we will all be something new, a multi-planet, multi-habitat species, united by our origins and diversified by our experiences. A person born on Mars might call themselves Martian and develop a love for their rust-hued world, just as a person born in a cylinder habitat might feel pride in their city of the stars. But ideally, this diversification of homes does not fracture humanity. Rather, it reinforces a deeper truth, whether under an alien sky or an engineered dome or the blue vault of Earth. We are all human. We carry the same stardust in our bones, the same yearnings in our hearts. For the artist living in a lunar settlement, creating sculptures from moon dust, the scientist on a years-long voyage toward Jupiter's moons, analyzing data as Jupiter grows from a dot to a giant marbled sphere outside their window, the farmer tending hydroponic rice in an orbital habitat with Earth overhead, they all share in the great human saga. They swap stories over light-minute delays, trade goods and songs across the void, celebrate each other's festivals, perhaps Earth's New Year, as well as the anniversary of their habitat's founding. Space has not diminished culture. It has amplified it, given it new canvas and context. There will be philosophical shifts too. When the majority of humans, one distant day, live off Earth, our perspective on issues like environmental stewardship, resource use, and even the meaning of nature will evolve. Having seen entire planets as singular, fragile spheres, how could we not become, at heart, guardians of worlds? The overview effect that once struck individual astronauts may become a common mindset of our spacefaring civilization, a constant awareness of the unity and preciousness of all life-bearing islands in the cosmic sea. Earth, our beautiful birthplace, might then be treated with the reverence it deserves, a cherished garden in the midst of a bustling space civilization, preserved and healed with knowledge gleaned from managing ecosystems in space. We might become gentler with our cradle precisely because we can live elsewhere. We would no longer see Earth as a resource to exhaust, but as a beloved ancestral home to protect. And what of existence itself? Some thinkers once worried that moving into space might cause us to lose our grounding, to play God with environments. But perhaps the opposite has happened. It has humbled us. In space, we directly confront the vastness of the universe and the limits of our knowledge. Each new habitat we build, each new planet we touch, reminds us how much there is to learn and how careful we must be. We have become both students and stewards on a cosmic scale. With each step beyond Earth, we carry not only our ambition, but a responsibility to use what we've learned to protect life, to spread life, and to honor that spark of life we've so far found only on our own world. Imagine far in the future, a traveler returning to Earth after many years born and raised in the colonies. As their ship enters Earth's atmosphere and they gaze at blue oceans and green continents directly for the first time, they might feel a profound connection. This is the legendary birthplace they've heard of, the origin of their people. They step out onto the soil and maybe gravity feels heavy, the air feels thick, the sounds of birds and rustling leaves nearly bring them to tears because they've known only controlled nature. In that moment, they and we realize that leaving Earth has only deepened our appreciation of Earth. And conversely, those of us who remain earthbound look up at night and feel pride and comfort that our kin dwell among those stars, that humanity has grown, not in a way that abandons its past, but that fulfills its potential. We have become, in essence, citizens of the universe, as at home in the sky as we once were on the savannah. If one believes in destiny, perhaps this was ours, to extend life's reach, to be the bridge between worlds. If one believes in the power of choice, then it was our greatest collective choice, to not remain confined and vulnerable on one planet, but to brave the unknown and ensure our survival and flourishing across new domains. Now, picture once more a human body floating above Earth. Only this time, they are not alone. Around them, the lights of human habitation sparkle in concert with the stars. There is a space station nearby with a rotating torus where hundreds work and play. There is the moon in the distance, with the glint of domes at its south pole where settlements harvest ice and welcome new arrivals. Mars shines reddish, a beacon of a new society growing in its plains and craters. Perhaps even beyond, a faint shimmer betrays a caravan of ships embarking on the first voyage to another star. The solitary figure floats in awe, not of emptiness, but of a cosmos that is awakening with life's presence. They turn their gaze to the blue earth below, a jewel that gave birth to all this. "Thank you," they whisper, a quiet benediction to our home world. Then they turn outward, toward the distant stars that beckon. In their eyes is the reflection of earthlight mingled with starlight, and maybe, just maybe, the light of a distant habitat where someone else at that same moment is looking back toward Earth. Across the darkness, human beings see each other's lights and know we have made the endless void into a tapestry of homes. Can we live in outer space? Yes. We live there now. We will live there more and more. Outer space is becoming not a void, but a vast village, with Earth as its heart and humanity as its soul. What was once our ultimate question has become our continuous story, a story of adaptation, exploration, creativity, and care. And as we carry this story forward, we remain humble beneath the stars. We remember that we are still small in the cosmic expanse, but we have one extraordinary gift: the ability to imagine and to act, to dream and to build. In the silence of space, a new chapter of human destiny is being written in the trails of rocket flames and the green sprouting leaves of orbital gardens. It's a chapter that says our home is not one place, but many. That wherever we go, we bring our humanity with us and find ways to belong. Calmly, cinematically, poetically, we continue our voyage, generation after generation, turning science fiction into living fact, turning distant lights into neighborly beacons. The story of living in outer space has no end, only new beginnings. And somewhere, sometime in the future, a family will stand together on a hill under an alien sky, perhaps with 2 moons, or rings, or a swirl of galaxies visible, and they will watch a sunset and know that they are home. Different sky, different ground, but home nonetheless. Because home is wherever we build a life filled with meaning, connection, and hope. Thus, the next chapters are ours to write, guided by curiosity, caution, and the enduring truth that the sky is not a limit at all, merely the gateway to an endless home among the stars. For ultimately, the question we began with has transformed. It is no longer merely, can we live in outer space, but rather, how will we choose to live and to thrive as citizens of the cosmos? With outer space as our new ocean and infinite frontier, we carry forward our humanity into the unknown, determined to shape it with wisdom and wonder. That journey, boundless in scope and rich with new beginnings, lies before us all. Under the light of a billion distant darkness of space, a star dies. For a brief moment it outshines everything around it, a beacon of unimaginable brilliance piercing the void. What was once a steady pinprick of light in the night sky suddenly blossoms into a furious brightness. only to fade away and vanish. This is the paradox of a supernova, the explosive death of a star that looks to us like the appearance of a new one. In that instant of violent death, something new is born in its wake. We watch from our tiny world with both wonder and humility. Across the gulf of light, years, a distant sun has reached the end of its life and unleashed an energy beyond comprehension. It is an end in the most dramatic fashion possible, a final act that illuminates the cosmos. Yet it is also a beginning. The star's death throes scatter the heavy elements forged in its heart out into space, seeding the darkness with the ingredients for new stars, new planets, perhaps new life. In dying, the star becomes a cosmic phoenix. Its ashes enrich the galaxy and fertilize the universe. In a supernova's fleeting flash, we witness a cycle as old as the cosmos itself, creation and destruction entwined. The universe began with light, and in each stellar death, there is a small echo of that beginning, a burst of radiance, a flood of particles and atoms hurled outward to partake in future creations. Every one of us carries the story of these explosions in our bodies, the iron in our blood, the calcium in our bones, the oxygen we breathe. Those atoms were forged in stellar furnaces and scattered by stellar explosions long before the Earth coalesced. We are, quite literally, made of stardust, born from the remnants of ancient supernovae. So when we look up at the night sky, we are not just seeing stars, we are seeing memories. Each point of light is a story that may one day end in a supernova, as countless stars have before. Some of those stories ended eons ago, their light only now reaching us, bearing news of cosmic endings that were also cosmic beginnings. In the darkness between the stars, there are ghosts, expanding clouds of gas and dust that were once suns. And there are futures, nascent stars, forming in nebulae enriched by those past explosions. This is the tale of supernovas, at once an elegy and a celebration. It is the tale of how stars live, die, and transform the universe. It is a story written across millions of years, but observable in a single human lifetime as a sudden blaze in the sky. Together, we will journey through this story. We will witness the birth of a star and follow its life to the cataclysmic moment when the core collapses. We will explore the different kinds of supernovae that nature has devised and see how these brilliant events have touched human lives and imaginations throughout history. We will visit the most famous stellar explosions known to science and what they left behind. Beautiful nebulae, spinning neutron stars, perhaps even black holes that swallow all light. As we voyage through time and space in our collective imagination, we will see how supernovas are not random acts of destruction, but essential threads in the fabric of the cosmos. They are beacons, guiding our understanding of distant galaxies, engines driving the evolution of those galaxies, and perhaps harbingers of danger in our own cosmic neighborhood. They are the universe's great alchemists, forging heavy elements and sewing them far and wide. And in their afterglow, we find insight into the deepest mysteries of existence, including our own origins. Let us begin at the beginning of a star's life. Because to understand the death of a star, we must first understand how it lives. In the cosmic theater, every death scene is set by the long life that came before it. And so we step back to watch a star being born, knowing that in its birth lie the seeds of its demise and the promise of everything that will follow. The life cycle of stars. Before a star can die, it must live. Our journey begins in a vast, cold cloud of gas and dust, drifting in the galactic night, a stellar nursery waiting for a spark. In these dark, silent nebulas, gravity gradually draws denser clumps together. We imagine ourselves floating there as one particular clump, maybe a little larger than the rest, starts to collapse under its own weight. As it compresses, it heats up and begins to glow with a faint reddish light. We have witnessed the birth of a protostar, the first flicker of a new sun. In time, the growing protostar's core becomes hot and pressurized enough to ignite nuclear fusion. When its central temperature climbs to tens of millions of degrees, hydrogen atoms begin fusing into helium. With that first flash of fusion fire, a true star is born. It stabilizes, entering the long, steady middle of its life known as the main sequence. For millions to billions of years, this young star will shine, a blazing sphere of plasma held up against gravity by the continuous energy of fusion. In this stage, a delicate balance is struck. The inward pull of gravity and the outward push of radiant heat are in equilibrium. The star has found its rhythm, a stable heartbeat in the darkness. We look around and see countless stars on the main sequence, each with its own life clock ticking at a different rate. The massive ones, dozens of times heavier than our sun, burn their fuel extravagantly and live fast, shining hot and blue, white. They may spend only a few million years in this stable phase. Smaller stars, like our sun, burn more moderately and can shine for tens of billions of years. And the tiniest red dwarfs, barely heavy enough to ignite fusion, sip their fuel so slowly that they could outlive galaxies, trillions of years into the future. A star's mass is its fate. It determines how luminous the star is and how long it will live. As the eons pass, even the most enduring stars exhaust their primary fuel. In the core of a middle-aged star, like our sun, the hydrogen that once fused so plentifully is gradually converted to helium. When the core fuel runs low, the star begins to change. We watch as our once stable star starts to swell and redden, transforming into a red giant. Its outer layers puff outward, cooling and glowing a deep sunset hue. In its core, new fusion reactions ignite as helium fuses into carbon and oxygen. For a while, the star finds a new balance, but it is precarious, a sign of old age. For a star of modest size, this red giant phase is the prelude to a quiet death. When the helium is finally spent, such a star cannot muster the temperatures needed to fuse heavier elements. The core, now a hot ball of carbon and oxygen ash, begins to contract, while the outer layers become unstable. Gently, at least by cosmic standards, the star sheds its outer envelope into space, creating a glowing shell of gas called a planetary nebula. What remains at the center is the star's tiny, exposed heart, a white dwarf, no bigger than Earth, made of degenerate matter and slowly cooling over eternity. This is one possible end of the stellar life cycle, a hushed fading rather than a cataclysm. The once grand star becomes a faint ember, and the beautiful planetary nebula disperses into the interstellar medium over tens of thousands of years. But our focus is on a far more dramatic finale, one reserved for the giants among stars. Let us rewind a bit and follow the life of a truly massive star, say 10 or 20 times the mass of the Sun. These behemoths blaze blue, white, and live brief, brilliant lives. They race through their fuel, shining millions of times brighter than the Sun, and expending their core hydrogen in mere millions of years. When hydrogen runs out, the transition is anything but gentle. The core contracts and heats rapidly, and the star balloons into a red supergiant, enormous enough to engulf entire planetary systems. Betelgeuse, the red shoulder of Orion, is one such star nearing this final act, bloated, unstable, and nearing the end of its supplies. Inside such a red supergiant, the core temperatures soar high enough to fuse helium into carbon and oxygen, and then, with frightening speed, to fuse those elements into heavier ones. The star's life accelerates toward its conclusion. In successive stages, carbon burns to neon and magnesium, neon burns to oxygen, oxygen to silicon, and silicon to iron. We imagine peering into the heart of this titanic star in its last million years, and seeing something like the layers of an onion, concentric shells of burning elements, hydrogen in the outer layers, then helium, carbon, oxygen, and so on, all feeding an increasingly ferocious furnace at the core. At last, the star builds an iron core deep in its center. Iron is a fatal milestone for a massive star, for when nuclei fuse into iron, no energy is released. The process that sustained the star's outward pressure grinds to a halt, as if a beating heart has suddenly stopped. The core can no longer support the crushing weight of the star's immense outer layers. For a brief moment, a tense silence falls inside the star, the calm before an unimaginable storm. This is the end of the star's life as a normal star. In the iron core, which may be about the size of Earth, but with over 1 billion times Earth's mass, no more thermonuclear miracles remain to stave off gravity. The star has reached the brink of catastrophe. All the glorious millions of years of shining have led to this precipice. The outward light falters, the balance is undone, and gravity prepares to exact its final victory. In that final moment, the stage is set for a collapse and an explosion, the supernova we have been waiting for. The life cycle of the star, from birth in a nebula to maturity in the main sequence to bloated old age, has brought it inexorably to an existential crisis. What happens next will be the subject of the following chapter in our story. A chapter written in fire and fury as the star's core collapses and a supernova is born. The final act, core collapse. The end comes swiftly and without mercy. In the heart of our massive star, the iron core has grown to a critical mass, roughly 1.5 times the mass of our Sun, compressed into a sphere barely 50 miles across. At this extreme, the familiar laws of matter are on the verge of breaking down. Gravity, long held at bay by the energy from fusion, finally has the upper hand, and then, in a fraction of a second, the core buckles. We find ourselves in the core at the moment of collapse. Temperatures have soared to over 10 billion degrees and rising. The iron nuclei, pressed unbearably tight, begin to disintegrate into smaller particles. Electrons are driven into protons, turning them into neutrons and releasing floods of ghost, like particles called neutrinos. The core's atoms, once the powerhouse of the star, are now crushed into an ultra-dense ball of neutrons. In the span of a heartbeat, the core implodes, matter-free, falling inward at speeds approaching a significant fraction of light. The densities reach astronomical levels, higher than those inside an atomic nucleus. For an instant, the core is like a giant atomic nucleus itself, a sphere of neutrons about the size of a city. Suddenly, this collapse slams to a halt. The neutron core, essentially incompressible, resists further squeezing. It's as if the star has hit a concrete floor at nearly 1/4 the speed of light. The infalling material recoils. In that violent rebound, a powerful shockwave is born at the core and begins plowing outward through the star. But the shock alone is not yet the famous supernova explosion. It threatens to stall as it loses energy, tearing apart iron nuclei in its path. For a brief moment, it seems the star might simply collapse and swallow itself quietly. Then something extraordinary intervenes. The flood of neutrinos. Remember those neutrinos produced as electrons, and protons were crushed together. In the turmoil of the collapsing core, billions upon billions of neutrinos are streaming out. Normally, neutrinos hardly ever interact with matter. They can zip through an entire star as if it were empty space. But here, in the densest environment the universe can offer outside of a black hole, even neutrinos begin to collide with matter. They deposit a stupendous amount of energy into the infalling layers just behind the shock front. This energy is the spark that revives the dying shockwave. With neutrino power added to the rebound, the shock roars back to life, surging outward with renewed fury. Now the star truly explodes. Within less than a second, the core collapse has transformed into an outgoing detonation. The shockwave tears through the star's layers from inside out. The overlying material, hydrogen, helium, carbon, all the way to the surface, is blasted into space at incredible speeds. The pressures and temperatures are so immense that new nuclear reactions ignite in the chaos, forging elements heavier than iron in fleeting moments of neutron bombardment. Gold, uranium, and dozens of other heavy elements are synthesized in these last violent seconds, like the final flourish of a master craftsman finishing a grand work. From outside, we would see nothing of this cataclysmic ballet until the shock breaks the star's surface. One moment, the star was a red supergiant, perhaps shining a bit erratically. The next moment, boom. The surface of the star is abruptly ejected, and a brilliant flash of light known as the shock breakout occurs. The star's outer layers, now unleashed, race outward as an expanding fireball, glowing a hot blue, white from the immense heat of the explosion. Within hours, the brightness swells dramatically. Within days, the exploded star becomes one of the brightest objects in its galaxy. A supernova has appeared where a familiar star used to be. At the core of this expanding fury lies the crushed remnant of the star, the ball of neutrons that survived the collapse. It is extremely small and dense. If its mass is below a certain threshold, it will settle as a neutron star, a city-sized stellar corpse. If it's more massive, nothing can halt its collapse, and it continues shrinking to become a black hole, an abyss from which no light escapes. But in either case, that core is no longer producing light. All the radiance of the supernova comes from the explosion's aftermath, from radioactive isotopes created in the blast decaying and heating the debris, and from the shock heating the star's outer layers as they expand. The dying star's final scream echoes across the electromagnetic spectrum. First comes a burst of neutrinos, an invisible herald racing ahead of the light. Then, the light arrives, rapidly growing to a peak brightness that can rival an entire galaxy's output of stars. For weeks, too, months, the debris of the star glows intensely, powered by the decay of unstable isotopes forged in the fireball. We imagine watching from a safe distance as the shattered star's remains expand in a great spherical shell, cooling and dimming over time. Where once there was a mighty star, now there is a cloud of glowing ash, the embryonic form of a supernova remnant, and, hidden at the center, a compact new child of the cosmos born from the core's collapse. This is a core collapse supernova, the fate of massive stars. It is nature's grandest light show, a release of energy so colossal that for a short time, a single star's death outshines all the billions of stars in its galaxy. But not all supernovae follow this script. There is another type of stellar death, one that begins not with a massive living star, but with the quiet ember of a star that died long ago. Before exploring the remnants and outcomes of core collapse explosions further, we will take a detour to understand the other path to a supernova, the path of the white dwarf and the thermonuclear runaway. Two paths to destruction, Type 1 versus Type 2. Not all stars that go supernova do so in the same way. As astronomers studied the light from these stellar explosions, they found telltale differences. Some supernovae show signatures of hydrogen in their exploded debris. Others have no hydrogen lines at all. This was the first clue that there are two distinct paths to stellar oblivion. In the astronomical naming convention, those with hydrogen are called Type 2 supernovae, and those without are Type 1. We now understand that behind these spectral differences lie very different stories. The Type 2 supernova is the scenario we have just witnessed, the core collapse of a massive star that still had its hydrogen envelope at the time of explosion. The ejected material in a Type 2 supernova's spectrum reveals abundant hydrogen because the star was a red supergiant until the moment it died. These are the deaths of solitary massive stars, tearing themselves apart from the inside out. But what of the Type 1, the ones that mysteriously lack hydrogen? It turns out some stars die by borrowing a kind of second life. and then blowing themselves to pieces in a thermonuclear fury. Imagine a star, much like our Sun. After living out its life and quietly shedding its outer layers, it ends as a white dwarf, a small, dense stellar corpse composed mostly of carbon and oxygen, with no ongoing fusion. Normally, a white dwarf simply cools over the eons, but if this white dwarf has a close companion star, fate may have a more explosive plan. Picture a binary star system where one star is a white dwarf and the other is a living star. The white dwarf, though dead in the sense of fusion, still exerts strong gravity. It begins siphoning gas from its companion, pulling hydrogen and helium off the neighboring star's outer layers. The stolen gas accumulates on the white dwarf's surface, compressing and heating. For a while, this theft goes unnoticed on a cosmic scale. The white dwarf grows more massive, creeping toward a critical limit, about 1.4 times the mass of the Sun, known as the Chandrasekhar limit. This is the maximum mass that a white dwarf, supported only by the quantum pressure of electrons, can hold without collapsing. When the white dwarf approaches this threshold, something incredible happens. The pressure and temperature at its center become high enough to ignite carbon fusion in a runaway manner. Unlike a normal star, the white dwarf has no way to regulate this burning. It is essentially a giant bomb waiting for a spark. The carbon fusion spreads rapidly in a wave through the dwarf's interior, unleashing a titanic thermonuclear explosion. In a fraction of a second, the entire white dwarf is obliterated in one of the most brilliant fireworks the universe has to offer, a Type Ia supernova. This Type Ia supernova is fundamentally different from the core, collapse Type II. It is not a star's core imploding under gravity. It is a prompt detonation, a nuclear bomb on a stellar scale. The white dwarf is entirely destroyed. No neutron star or black hole is left behind, only an expanding cloud of debris. Because the explosion comes from the sudden fusion of about a sun's mass of carbon and oxygen, it tends to produce a very consistent brightness each time. In fact, Type Ia supernovae act as standard candles for astronomers. Since they all reach roughly the same peak luminosity, we can gauge their distances by how bright they appear. We'll revisit this idea later when we see how such supernovae helped map the universe. For now, consider what the lack of hydrogen in the Type I spectrum means. A white dwarf has no hydrogen envelope. It lost all that long ago when its progenitor star shed its outer layers. So when it explodes, the debris shows no hydrogen lines. That's how we know a supernova was likely a Type Ia. Its light is missing hydrogen and often shows a distinctive signature of iron and nickel from the burned outcore of the white dwarf. There are also other subclasses of Type I. For instance, Type Ib and Type Ic supernovae are actually massive star explosions like Type II, but ones that shed their outer hydrogen before exploding. These usually happen in massive stars that blew off their envelopes via strong winds or interactions in a binary system, leaving a bare core to collapse. Thus, they are core collapse supernovae like Type II, only stripped of their outer layers, so they masquerade as Type I by lacking hydrogen in their spectra. It can sound alphabet, soup confusing, but the essence is this. One path to supernova is a single, massive star collapsing under gravity. The other path is a smaller star, a white dwarf, blowing itself apart in a nuclear runaway. Both paths produce immense explosions, but their causes and outcomes differ. In one, a stellar core implodes and might leave a dense remnant. In the other, a stellar remnant detonates and leaves nothing substantial behind at its center. Understanding these two fundamental types gives us insight into the variety of cosmic fireworks we observe. Some supernovae announce the dramatic death of a lone giant. Others signal the demise of a long dead star, reignited by a companion. Together, Type I and Type II supernovae account for nearly all the stellar explosions we see lighting up distant galaxies. With this framework in mind, we can better appreciate the events and remnants we are about to explore. Now let us step out of the theoretical realm and into human history. Long before we unraveled the astrophysical mechanisms, people witnessed supernovae in the sky without knowing what they were. They saw brilliant new stars appear where none had been before and grappled with their own interpretations. Our cosmic story now crosses paths with the human story as we look at supernovas through the eyes of those who saw them from Earth centuries ago. Supernovas in human history. Long before modern science unraveled the physics of supernovae, humans were witnessing these celestial events with naked eyes and recording their wonder and fear. To ancient sky watchers, the sudden appearance of a brilliant new star in the firmament was an astounding, often ominous event. The regular stars and planets followed known patterns, but a new star, a nova or guest star as some called it, defied the idea of an unchanging heaven. It was as if the cosmos itself had spoken in a burst of light. One of the earliest recorded supernovae occurred in 185 AD. Chinese astronomers noted a strange guest star in the southern sky. It lingered for about 8 months before fading away, enough time for ancient observers to take careful notice. They dutifully recorded its position and its disappearance in official court chronicles. We now know that this was indeed a supernova, and modern astronomers have rediscovered the faint traces of its remnant about 8,000 light years from Earth. That ancient record, largely qualitative and couched in the language of omens, aligns with the physical evidence we see today of a Type Ia supernova explosion that occurred nearly 2 millennia ago. In late April of the year 1006 AD, a staggeringly bright guest star exploded into Earth's skies in the constellation Lupus. It ultimately reached an estimated visual magnitude of around 7.5, so bright that it was visible during the day. Observers across Eurasia marveled at it. Historical records say it cast shadows at night and was even visible during the day. The Egyptian astronomer Ali ibn Ridwan wrote that it was a large star which appeared in the south, having an enormous luster, far outshining Venus. We believe this was the brightest supernova ever observed by humanity in recorded history, what we now call SN 1006. People all over the world took note, and in some places it stirred fear or was interpreted as a portent. In North America, a possible record exists in an ancestral Puebloan pictograph, a depiction of a star next to a crescent moon on a rock wall in Chaco Canyon, which some have interpreted as a representation of this guest star. Though intriguing, such interpretations remain debated. Just a few decades after that, on July 4th, 1054 AD, all of Earth was treated to celestial fireworks as another new star appeared, this time in the constellation Taurus, the Bull. Chinese court astronomers recorded that it was initially brighter than the moon and lingered in the sky for nearly 2 years before slowly fading from view. Unbeknownst to those observers, they were watching the birth of what we today call the Crab Nebula, the expanding remains of that exploded star. SN 1054 was likely a massive star's death. The memory of this event may also have been preserved outside East Asia. Medieval Japanese and Arabic records also mention a brilliant guest star around that time. And as mentioned, some interpret the rock art in the American Southwest as depicting the event. For medieval Europe, knowledge of these events was sparse. Europe in 1006 and 1054 was in the middle of the Dark Ages and early medieval period, and scholarly astronomy was less developed than in the Islamic world or China. Moreover, Aristotelian doctrine held sway. The heavens beyond the moon were thought to be immutable and unchanging. A bright new star did not fit that worldview and might even have been ignored or explained away by those who adhered to the idea of perfect, unchanging skies. Still, by the Renaissance a few centuries later, careful observers were starting to challenge that ancient dogma. In November 1572, sky watchers in Europe, including a young Danish astronomer named Tycho Brahe, were astonished by a brilliant star in the constellation Cassiopeia, where no star had been seen before. Tycho diligently observed this novastella every night, measuring its position relative to the fixed stars. He found it showed no parallax, meaning it was far beyond the moon, out among the stars, which directly contradicted Aristotle's notion of an unchanging celestial realm. Tycho's supernova shone as bright as Venus for weeks. We now suspect SN 1572 was a Type Ia thermonuclear supernova, the kind involving a white dwarf. Modern studies of the remnant show no neutron star at the center, consistent with a Type Ia where the star was obliterated. For Tycho and his contemporaries, the event was pivotal. His observations, published in a work titled De Nova Stello, were a key piece of evidence that the heavens do change, helping pave the way for the new astronomy of Copernicus, Galileo, and Kepler. To the public and religious authorities, the new star was often seen as an omen. To Tycho, it was a scientific revelation. Only 32 years later, in October 1604, another brilliant star burst forth, this time in the constellation Ophiuchus. The famous astronomer Johannes Kepler observed it closely and wrote a book about it. SN 1604, or Kepler's supernova, became brighter than all stars and planets in the sky at its peak. Like Tycho's, it had no measurable parallax, further driving the nail into the coffin of the Aristotelian crystalline spheres theory. It was the last supernova observed in our Milky Way with the naked eye. Modern astronomers have studied Kepler's supernova remnant and, based on its characteristics, believe it too was likely a Type Ia event. Thus, the two great Renaissance supernovae were both thermonuclear explosions of white dwarfs, yet their appearance at critical moments in history had enormous impact on human thought, marking the end of an era when the cosmos was thought to be static and perfect. Throughout human history, only a handful of these new stars have been recorded, but each left an imprint on culture and science. From Chinese astrologers linking them to dynastic fortunes, to European scholars using them to question classical doctrines, supernovae have occasionally influenced the course of human thought. Most of the time, the stars live and die unseen. But when one does announce itself to us, it rarely goes unnoticed. These events also gradually built a bridge between myth and science. Each recorded observation, from 185 AD to 1572 to 1604, added a piece to the puzzle that modern astrophysicists would later assemble with telescopes and physics. Today, we can return to those historical supernovae with our scientific tools. The Crab Nebula still glows in our telescopes, and at its center, a pulsar, a rapidly spinning neutron star, blinks 30 times a second, the collapsed core left from that explosion. The remnants of Tycho's 1572 and Kepler's 1604 supernovae have been detected as expanding shockwaves in space, and careful measurements of their light, echoes, and debris composition have helped identify their type. In this way, the observations of long-ago sky watchers connect directly to the science we conduct now. The people of the past saw supernovas without understanding their true nature, but they carefully noted their appearance and timing. We, following in their footsteps, can point our instruments to those same locations centuries later to learn the why and how. It is a beautiful continuity of curiosity. Now, with the historical context in mind, let's focus on a few of those famous supernovae that have become legends in both astronomy and culture. The ones whose names have been mentioned, the mysterious guest star of 1054 that created the Crab Nebula, the brilliant new stars observed by Tycho and Kepler that altered the course of astronomy, and a much more recent stellar explosion that heralded the dawn of a new era in space observation. These are supernovas that stand out like beacons in human history's record of the sky. Witnessing great explosions, famous supernovas, Across the ages, certain supernova events stand out as especially notable, either for their brilliance, for the insights they gave us, or for the lore that surrounds them. Let us revisit a selection of these cosmic spectacles in more detail, to feel what it might have been like to witness them and to understand what they have taught us. SN 1054, the Crab Nebula's birth. It is summer in the year 1054. On a July night, people around the world gaze upward to find a startling new light in the heavens, near the starry outline of Taurus the Bull. Chinese astronomers in the Song dynasty record that it is as bright as Jupiter, eventually even brighter, visible in the daytime for weeks. They call it a guest star, and note its gradual fading over nearly 2 years. What those observers see is the death of a massive star, roughly 6,500 light years away. Today, when we point a telescope at that same spot, we see the Crab Nebula, a sprawling tapestry of filamentary gas and dust expanding in space. At its center, a tiny pulsar flashes 30 times a second like a cosmic lighthouse. This pulsar is the collapsed core of the star that exploded. The Crab Nebula, with its eerie tendrils of glowing gas, is essentially frozen fireworks from 1054, still expanding at thousands of kilometers per second. Studying it across different wavelengths has given astronomers invaluable insight into how supernova debris evolves and how neutron stars behave. One can imagine the awe of ancient sky, watchers seeing the initial explosion, not knowing that before them was the creation of a beautiful nebula that later astronomers would come to understand and marvel over. The Crab Nebula stands as a bridge between human history and astrophysics, a guest star turned enduring monument in the sky. Tycho's star of 1572. Fast forward to November 1572, Denmark. Tycho Brahe, returning from his evening walk, looks up and is astonished to see a brilliant star in the otherwise familiar pattern of Cassiopeia. A star that simply was not there the night before now shines proudly. Tycho quickly organizes systematic observations, measuring the star's position relative to the moon and known stars night after night. He finds, to his wonder and intellectual delight, that the new star exhibits no parallax, no shift against the distant star background from Earth's orbit. It must lie among the fixed stars, far beyond the moon, proving the heavens are not immutable. Tycho writes about this discovery in detail. The star shines with the brightness of Venus, then slowly fades over about 16 months. We now know SN 1572 was a Type Ia supernova, a thermonuclear explosion of a white dwarf star in a binary system. Its remnant, seen with modern telescopes, is an expanding cloud of gas with no pulsar or neutron star inside. Tycho's careful work on this supernova provided crucial evidence that the Aristotelian cosmos was flawed. It marked a paradigm shift. The universe beyond Earth was dynamic and changing. Culturally, Tycho's new star challenged theologians and philosophers. Scientifically, it propelled the likes of Kepler and Galileo to further question cosmic dogma. It is poignant that a dying star, which had likely been dead for thousands of years before its light reached Earth, helped spark the birth of modern astronomy. Kepler's supernova of 1604. Just 32 years after Tycho's event, the cosmos provided another spectacular display. In October 1604, in the constellation Ophiuchus, a new star blazed forth. It reached magnitude 2.5, outshining every star and planet in the night sky. The great mathematician and astronomer Johannes Kepler observed it extensively. People across Europe saw it. Kepler, much like Tycho, found that it showed no parallax. By this time, the Copernican view of the solar system was gaining traction, and Galileo would soon turn a telescope to the heavens. Kepler's supernova, though a brilliant apparition, was the last such to be observed in our Milky Way to date. Modern analysis of its remnant, using space telescopes, indicates it was likely a type Ia as well. Kepler compiled observations of the 1604 supernova, noting its color changes and steady decline in brightness over a year and a half. Kepler's work, published in De Stella Nova, along with Tycho's earlier nova, cemented the idea that the heavens evolve. Philosophically, it shook the last resistance to the notion that change and decay occur in the celestial realm just as on Earth. After Kepler's star, no new stars were seen in our galaxy, so these two Renaissance supernovae stand out as heralds of a new worldview. They bookend the 16th century's scientific revolution, and each bears the name of the astronomer who studied it because their observations were so influential. Supernova 1987A, a modern spectacle. For more than 300 years after Kepler's 1604 event, no supernova bright enough to see with the naked eye was observed, though many undoubtedly occurred hidden behind interstellar dust or on the far side of the galaxy. Then, on February 24, 1987, something historic occurred. A brilliant new star was spotted in the Large Magellanic Cloud, a satellite galaxy of the Milky Way, visible to the naked eye in the southern hemisphere. This was the nearest supernova since Kepler's about 168,000 light-years away. Supernova 1987A was extraordinary, not just for being visible to modern humans, but for being studied with modern scientific tools. Prior to the visible light, detectors deep underground in Japan, the US, and the Soviet Union picked up a flurry of neutrinos, 24 neutrinos in total, arriving within a 13th of a second window, just hours before the supernova was seen. These ghostly particles were emitted from the collapsing core of the star and provided direct confirmation of the core collapse mechanism we described. It was the first time humanity caught neutrinos from beyond the solar system, and they came from a dying star's core. When the light arrived, telescopes around the world and above it turned to watch SN 1987A. They saw the rise and fall of its light, measured the nuclear isotopes powering its glow, and observed its debris expanding. SN 1987A turned out to be a bit of a surprise to theorists. The star that exploded was not a red supergiant, but a blue supergiant, a hotter, more compact star. It had likely been a red supergiant earlier, but perhaps merged with a companion or shed mass in a complex way that left it blue at the time of collapse. The star left behind a striking arrangement of glowing rings, material it had ejected in earlier epochs, which the supernova's blast wave has since been colliding with, producing a fireworks show of its own as the rings brighten in response. We are still observing 1987A decades later. It's a living laboratory for supernova physics. So far, no neutron star has been definitively seen inside, leaving a tiny bit of mystery. But we detected the cobalt and titanium produced in the explosion, confirming models of how elements are forged. We witnessed the light from the blast echo off interstellar dust, giving us different perspectives of the event. In short, 1987A was like an astrophysical Rosetta Stone, offering answers to long-standing questions and posing new ones. For people around the world in 1987, especially those in places like Australia or Chile, who could see the Large Magellanic Cloud in their night sky, the appearance of a new star was thrilling. Unlike in 1572, it didn't spark fear or philosophical crisis. Instead, it sparked celebration among astronomers and curiosity among the public. At observatories, champagne bottles were uncorked when the first neutrinos were confirmed and the optical counterpart was found. Humanity had waited centuries to see such an event up close, and now we finally had front row seats. SN 1987A inaugurated the era of multi-messenger astronomy, using not just light, but particles like neutrinos to study cosmic events. And it came just as computing and telescope technology allowed us to capture it in unprecedented detail. From the ancient guest star of 1054, recorded by Chinese astrologers, to the modern supernova of 1987, observed with neutrino detectors and space telescopes, our understanding has grown immensely. Each famous supernova has left an enduring legacy. The Crab Nebula's pulsar confirmed the existence of neutron stars. Tycho's and Kepler's observations helped dismantle the old cosmic order. SN 1987A gave direct confirmation of theory and a wealth of data on how supernovae work. They are shining milestones on our journey to comprehend the universe. Having witnessed what happens when stars explode, we turn now to one of the most profound consequences of these events: the creation of the very stuff that makes up planets and people. In the violent cauldrons of supernovae, elements are forged that otherwise would not exist. This is the story of nucleosynthesis, the cosmic alchemy carried out in stellar life and death. Stardust and elements, nucleosynthesis in supernovae. Every atom in our bodies has a story that stretches back to the stars. The golden ring on a finger, the calcium in our bones, the iron in our blood, all were forged in cosmic furnaces and explosive crucibles. Supernovae are not merely spectacular light shows, they are also the universe's great alchemists. To understand how, we must look at what happens deep inside stars and during those final explosive moments of their deaths. Throughout a massive star's life, its core is a fusion factory, sequentially forging heavier elements out of lighter ones. Hydrogen fuses into helium in the star's youth. Later, helium burns into carbon and oxygen. Then, in truly massive stars, oxygen, neon, magnesium, silicon, sulfur, and more in turn undergo fusion as the star approaches old age. This sequence of fusion reactions builds up the periodic table within the star, but it stops at iron. As we saw, once iron accumulates in the core, no further fusion can release energy. Without energy output to support it, the iron core succumbs to gravity and collapses, triggering a core collapse supernova. When a supernova explosion occurs, it not only liberates these pre-made elements by blowing the star apart, it also creates new ones in the heat of the blast. Consider the core, collapse supernova of a massive star. As the shockwave rips through the star's layers, the extreme heat and flood of neutrons trigger a flurry of nuclear reactions in the surrounding material. In mere seconds, elements heavier than iron are synthesized via rapid neutron capture (E), a process called the R process. The collapsing core unleashes an enormous number of neutrons, and atoms riding the shockwave absorb these neutrons in rapid fire succession. These neutron-heavy nuclei then undergo radioactive decay into stable elements. In this way, elements like iodine, gold, platinum, uranium, roughly half of all elements heavier than iron, are created in the cauldron of a single supernova explosion. Meanwhile, in a Type Ia supernova, a different kind of nucleosynthesis occurs, the furious burning of carbon and oxygen into a range of intermediate mass elements, particularly a lot of nickel and iron. Type Ia supernovae are prolific producers of iron group elements. In fact, the iron that makes our blood red and the nickel and cobalt in steel are spread through galaxies largely by Type Ia supernovae. Without those explosions, iron, the heaviest element that normal stellar fusion can produce in quantity, would remain locked in stellar cores or white dwarfs. Supernovae act as cosmic salt shakers, scattering these elements into the galactic soup. Think of a supernova as a cosmic seed, spreader. The heavy elements created over the star's life, and in its explosive death, are hurled into space at thousands of kilometers per second. In the aftermath, what was once the star's core might be a neutron star or black hole, but all its outer material, now enriched with a bouquet of heavy elements, mixes into the wider interstellar medium. Over millions of years, that gas will drift, cool, and mingle with other gas clouds. When new stars eventually form from those clouds, they inherit that enrichment. Planets condense from the leftover dust and gas around those new stars, and in some of those planets, life might one day arise, incorporating the atoms that were forged in a star long ago. To put it poetically, supernovae are the universe's way of taking matter cooked in one star's kitchen and delivering it as raw material for new worlds. In the early universe, before any stars had lived and died, there were only the lightest elements: hydrogen, helium, and trace amounts of lithium. The very first generations of stars were born from this pristine gas. Many of those first stars likely died in powerful supernovae that enriched their surroundings with the first heavy elements. Each subsequent generation of stars thus had more metals available. Our Sun was born from a cloud already seeded by countless prior supernovae. That's why Earth has an iron core and rich chemistry, and why life here can have elements like carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and so on. All those elements were gifts from stars that died before the Sun was born. Carl Sagan famously said, "We are made of star stuff." And this is not just metaphor, but scientific truth. The nitrogen in our DNA, the calcium in our teeth, the iron in our blood, the carbon in the apple pie we might eat. These atoms were forged in stellar interiors and in the titanic explosions of supernova. We carry within us the ashes of long dead stars. Every time you hold a piece of gold jewelry or take a breath of air, you are touching remnants of a supernova's fury. In a very real sense, supernovae are our ancestors. They sculpted the elemental, abundances of our galaxy. They made possible the chemistry that begot life. Realizing this connection can change the way we see a starry night. The sky is no longer just a beautiful backdrop. It's our ancestral home. We have stardust in our veins. Supernovae ensure that the universe is chemically rich and ever changing, rather than static and composed of only the simplest elements. A universe without supernovae would be a dull place. No rocky planets, no breath of air, likely no life. Having explored how supernovae forge the ingredients of planets and people, let us now examine what becomes of the stars themselves after the blast. What of the core that collapsed? That neutron, rich ball that was left behind? It may become one of the strangest objects in the universe. Let's meet the exotic corpses of massive stars, the neutron stars and black holes that emerge from the wreckage of supernovae. The corpses of stars, neutron stars, and black holes. After the immense explosion of a supernova fades, after the debris is cast into space, something often remains at the center. An ultra-dense stellar corpse, the condensed memory of the star that was. In the case of a core collapsed supernova, the core's collapse is halted by forces of quantum physics, leaving behind either a neutron star or, if the star was hefty enough, a black hole. These remnants are as fascinating as the explosions themselves, for they are among the strangest objects in the universe. Neutron stars, the spinning cinders. Imagine compressing the Sun, 333,000 Earth masses, into a sphere about 20 kilometers across, roughly the size of a city. The crush of gravity is so extreme that atoms cannot survive. Electrons have been rammed into protons to form neutrons, and matter as we know it is essentially transformed into a giant atomic nucleus. This is a neutron star. A sugar cube-sized amount of neutron star material would outweigh a mountain. The gravity at its surface is so strong that if you dropped a marshmallow from 1 meter above a neutron star, by the time it hit the surface, it would strike with the energy of an atomic bomb. These mind-bending facts belie the humble name, neutron star, but they are the reality of what a massive star's core becomes after a successful supernova explosion. Neutron stars often reveal themselves as pulsars, objects that emit beams of electromagnetic radiation that sweep around as the star rotates, like beams from a lighthouse. The first pulsar was discovered in 1967 by Jocelyn Bell. At first it was so regular that it was half jokingly nicknamed LGM-1, hinting at the intrigue it caused. We now know pulsars are rapidly spinning neutron stars with intense magnetic fields, whipping around perhaps dozens or hundreds of times per second. The Crab Nebula's heart, for instance, is the Crab pulsar, spinning about 30 times a second, a lighthouse flashing in the wreckage of the 1054 supernova. Every pulse we receive is a rotation of that tiny neutron star, which carries on the legacy of the once mighty star by flashing its cosmic heartbeat centuries after the star's explosive death. Some neutron stars are even more extreme, magnetars, with magnetic fields 1,000 times stronger than a typical pulsar, capable of emitting flares that can disrupt Earth's ionosphere from tens of thousands of light years away. These bizarre objects are variations on the theme of neutron stars, matter in its most compact, stable form, holding perhaps up to 2 or 3 solar masses in that ultra-dense sphere. They gradually cool and slow down over time, but for many millions of years, they can spin rapidly and power energetic emissions, effectively signaling their presence to the cosmos. In a very real way, a neutron star is the remaining core of a star, still there after the supernova, not shining by fusion, but often emitting energy as it slows down, the stellar core's ghost, left haunting the site of the explosion. Black holes, the silent tombs. If the collapsed core of a star exceeds a certain mass, not even the pressure of neutrons can halt the collapse. In that case, gravity wins absolutely, and the core continues to shrink beyond the neutron star stage. It effectively vanishes from view, leaving behind a gravitational well so deep that not even light can climb out. A black hole is born. What remains is an object perhaps only a few kilometers wide, but containing more mass than our Sun. An object with no surface, only a point of no return, called an event horizon. Inside that boundary, space, time is curved into a pit from which nothing that falls in can escape. The core of the star has become a literal hole in the fabric of reality. Black holes were once theoretical curiosities, sprung from Einstein's general relativity equations, and considered by some to be too absurd to be real. Today, we have overwhelming evidence of their existence. Many stellar black holes announce themselves indirectly, often by interacting with a companion star. Gas from the companion may spiral into the black hole, heating up and emitting powerful X-rays before it vanishes across the event horizon. Cygnus X1, an X-ray source discovered in the 1960s, was the first strong black hole candidate. It likely formed from a massive star's collapse. Now we know many such X-ray binaries harbor black holes. Additionally, the ripples of gravitational waves detected in the past few years by observatories like LIGO and Virgo have come from mergers of stellar mass black holes, offering yet another confirmation that these dark remnants are out there. To stand on the surface of a neutron star or near a black hole's horizon is to confront the ultimate victory of gravity. Time itself behaves oddly in these realms. A clock on a neutron star's surface would tick significantly slower relative to one far away due to gravitational time dilation. Near a black hole, that effect becomes even more extreme. Time essentially stops at the horizon from an outside perspective. These effects, though counterintuitive, have been measured in weaker gravity regimes and match our theoretical predictions. In simpler terms, a neutron star, or black hole, is the outcome of a star's final battle with gravity. The star's core, unable to hold itself up, imploded and then found a new equilibrium as one of these exotic objects. They are the cinders or tombstones left after the brilliant supernova fire has gone out. Yet they are far from inert lumps. Neutron stars can light up their surroundings with beams of radiation or intense magnetic fields, and black holes, when fed by infalling gas, can become the engines for powerful X-ray sources or micro-quasars. Even in death, these stellar remnants can profoundly affect their environment. When we gaze into the night with radio telescopes,
or X-ray eyes, we occasionally hear the ticking of pulsars or see the flickering high energy glow of accreting black holes. Each is a supernova after story, the quiet, persistent end, note to a star's life. In the grand narrative, a massive star lives, explodes, and then either as a neutron star or black hole remains as a kind of monument. It's humbling to realize that the universe is littered with these tiny, dark remnants, hidden endpoints of countless stellar lives. We have now followed the star from cradle to grave, born in a cloud, shining steadily, dying in an explosion, and leaving behind a strange new object. Let us cast our eyes outward again to the expanding remnants of those explosions and see what becomes of the scattered star stuff itself. Supernovae do not merely vanish, they leave behind remnants that continue to glow and evolve, creating some of the most beautiful and intriguing sights in the cosmos. Ghostly echoes, supernova remnants. Long after the blinding flash of a supernova has faded from the sky, an ethereal apparition remains, the supernova remnant. These are vast, expanding clouds of debris, the scattered ashes of a star, still glowing from the energy of the explosion and the radioactive elements within. Supernova remnants are like cosmic smoke rings, beautiful, complex, and evolving over time, marking the spot where a star met its end. If we could watch a supernova remnant in fast forward, we'd see an almost spherical shockwave racing outward, plowing into the surrounding interstellar gas. Behind the shock front trails the tattered debris of the star, a mix of elements and newly formed radioactive isotopes, forming intricate structures as it interacts with itself and the environment. Immediately after the supernova, this cloud is extremely hot and shines brightly in X-rays. Over centuries and millennia, it expands and cools, beginning to radiate at optical wavelengths as well, and later in radio waves. Filamentary shapes appear, tangled ropes and sheets of gas shaped by magnetic fields and variations in density. One of the most famous remnants, the Crab Nebula, is a sight to behold even in a small telescope, a faint oval patch of light with subtle filament patterns. Long exposure photographs and modern space telescopes reveal those filaments in exquisite detail. Tendrils of glowing red, orange, where cooler gases like hydrogen and nitrogen emit visible light, interlaced with a bluish haze of electrons spiraling in the pulsar's magnetic field. The Crab Nebula is effectively powered from within by its pulsar. The neutron star's rotational energy keeps pumping out particles and fields that energize the nebula, making it shine far longer than it would from the explosion's initial heat alone. It's as if the remnant is a living organism with a beating heart that refuses to let the glow die out. Another remarkable remnant is Cassiopeia A. Although its originating supernova around 1680 was not widely observed, Cass A is a young remnant about 350 years old, and high-resolution images show an asymmetric, lumpy shell of gas about 10 light-years across. It's rushing outward at thousands of kilometers per second. By studying Cass A, scientists have gleaned insights into how the supernova explosion might have been irregular, not a perfectly symmetric blast, but one that ejected knots of material in some directions more than others. Cass A's debris is rich with elements like oxygen, sulfur, and silicon, clearly marking it as the remains of a massive star. In the center lies a faint neutron star, cooling in quiet isolation. The ghost of the star is not at rest. It's expanding and colliding with its surroundings, sending out shockwaves that heat the interstellar medium and even accelerate cosmic rays that zip through our galaxy and occasionally reach Earth. Supernova remnants can be breathtakingly beautiful. The Veil Nebula in Cygnus, for example, is the remnant of a supernova roughly 8,000 years ago. It now spans about 3 degrees of the sky as a wispy lacework of ionized gas. Through a telescope,
Parts of it appear as delicate filaments, so thin and gossamer that one can scarcely imagine the violent event that created them. These filaments are shock fronts seen edge on, where the shell of the remnant is ploughing into interstellar space and causing the gas to glow. What was once a catastrophic blast has, over millennia, become a faint, ghostly veil decorating the sky. Beyond their beauty, supernova remnants are profoundly important to the ecosystem of the galaxy. As the remnant expands, it sweeps up and stirs the interstellar medium, mixing the new heavy elements from the explosion into the cosmic clouds. This enriched material will one day become part of new stars and planets. The shock waves can trigger the collapse of nearby gas clouds, perhaps inducing new stars to form, so one star's death can sow the seeds for the birth of others. At the same time, remnants inject energy into the galaxy's gas, heating it and driving turbulent motions that can inhibit immediate star formation elsewhere. This feedback helps regulate how galaxies evolve, preventing them from turning all their gas into stars at once. Over tens of thousands of years, a supernova remnant will gradually dissipate. Its shock slows to the speed of sound in the surrounding medium and eventually merges with the general interstellar environment. By then, the heavy elements are well blended into the galactic reservoir. Only faint traces might remain, perhaps slightly higher concentrations of certain elements in that region of space, or cosmic ray particles that were accelerated by the remnant's shock still wandering the galaxy. Thus, a supernova remnant is the intermediate chapter of the story, between the violent death and the eventual recycling of the star's substance into new cosmic structures. It's the long, fading echo of the supernova's shout. By reading the glowing wisps and shock fronts, scientists can decode details of the explosion, how fast the material is moving, what it's made of, and how it's interacting with its surroundings. Even long after a star has died, its remnant continues to tell its story. In every supernova remnant, we see a snapshot of change in action. They are elegant reminders that even after catastrophic destruction, there is quiet creation and transformation. The scattered atoms will someday cool and perhaps gather again in dark nebulae, ready to form the next generation of stars. In that way, a ghostly remnant is not an end, but a bridge to new beginnings. Stepping back from individual remnants, we consider the grand scale once more. Supernovae, whether near or far, serve as brilliant beacons in the cosmos. Their light and energy travel across vast distances, sometimes allowing us to measure and understand the universe itself. In the next section, we'll explore how these stellar catastrophes become cosmic lighthouses and what they have revealed about the space between the galaxies and the fate of the universe at large. Cosmic beacons, light across the universe. Supernovae are not only agents of cosmic recycling, they also serve as signposts on the grandest scales. When a star explodes, it becomes, for a few weeks, one of the most luminous objects in the universe. A single supernova can outshine an entire galaxy of billions of stars. This extraordinary brilliance means that supernovae can be seen across immense distances, allowing astronomers to use them as cosmic beacons or lighthouses. By observing supernovae in remote galaxies, we can measure those galaxies' distances and probe the expansion of the universe itself. Among all supernovae, the type Ia have proven especially valuable in this regard. Because a type Ia results from a white dwarf reaching a critical mass and undergoing a thermonuclear explosion, the amount of energy released is fairly uniform from one event to another. In more practical terms, most type Ia supernovae reach about the same peak absolute luminosity, like bulbs of nearly the same wattage. If we observe a type Ia in a distant galaxy and measure how bright it appears, we can compare that to the known true brightness and deduce its distance. A classic use of the inverse, square law of light. This is why type Ia supernovae are termed standard candles. In the late 20th century,
astronomers began using these standard candles to chart the universe. They painstakingly observed type Ia supernovae in faraway galaxies, billions of light years distant. By doing so, they aimed to measure how fast the universe was expanding at different times in the past. The expectation was that the expansion should be slowing over time as gravity tugged on galaxies. But the supernova beacons told a different story. In 1998, two independent teams analyzing distant type Ia supernovae made a shocking discovery. Those supernovae were dimmer than expected in a decelerating universe. The simplest explanation was that the expansion of the universe has been speeding up, an acceleration driven by some mysterious force or energy inherent to space itself, later dubbed dark energy. It was a revelation that earned the 2011 Nobel Prize in Physics for the team leaders. Think about that. By observing the dying flashes of stars in galaxies halfway across the observable universe, we gleaned insight into the fundamental behavior of the cosmos on the largest scale. Each supernova that appeared in those distant galaxies, tiny dots of light on telescope images, carried within it the information needed to trace the history of cosmic expansion. The lives and deaths of stars, recorded as brief flickers in the night, became evidence for a new ingredient of the universe that now appears to dominate its fate. Supernovae also help us measure distances closer to home and map the three-dimensional structure of the universe. Even before the discovery of cosmic acceleration, astronomers used type Ia supernovae to refine the Hubble constant. By comparing distances from supernovae with the redshifts of their host galaxies, they calibrated the relationship between redshift and distance. This led to a better handle on the size and age of the universe. To this day, monitoring supernovae in distant galaxies remains crucial for improving our understanding of the universe's expansion history and for probing the nature of dark energy. Apart from cosmology, supernovae act as beacons that illuminate their local environment. As their light travels through space, it can be absorbed or re-emitted by any intervening gas or dust. By studying the spectrum of a supernova, we can detect absorption lines from elements in the host galaxy or in between galaxies. In one famous case, light from a distant supernova passed through the vicinity of a foreground galaxy cluster and was gravitationally lensed, producing multiple images of the supernova that reached Earth at different times. Astronomers observed one image of that supernova and, by understanding the lensing delay, successfully predicted when the second image would appear a couple of years later, and they saw it right on schedule. This kind of phenomenon turns supernovae into probes of the distribution of matter in the lensing clusters. Even without such exotic effects, every supernova in a distant galaxy provides clues about that galaxy, its composition, its star formation, history. When a massive star explodes in, say, a galaxy tens of millions of light years away, we detect it and thus learn that this galaxy is actively forming stars. Supernova surveys have catalogued thousands of supernovae in all types of galaxies, revealing patterns. For instance, Type 2 and Type IB/C supernovae occur only in galaxies with ongoing star formation. You won't find a massive star supernova in a quiescent elliptical galaxy, because such galaxies no longer have massive young stars. On the other hand, Type Ia supernovae occur in both star-forming galaxies and old elliptical galaxies, since every galaxy has some population of binary white dwarfs or old stars that can produce them. The sheer number of supernovae now catalogued has allowed us to identify rare subclasses and see subtle differences. We found peculiar types often by catching them in other galaxies. No two supernovae are exactly alike. Each explosion has its quirks, but they cluster into families that we can study statistically. And all of this has been possible because the universe provides an endless supply of distant supernovae, and we've developed the technology to monitor the sky systematically. Technology is rapidly advancing this field. The Vera C. Rubin Observatory in Chile with its legacy survey of space and time, is expected to discover on the order of 10,000 supernovae per year in the coming decade. It will effectively make a high-definition movie of the optical sky, catching transient events like supernovae on a nightly basis. We will have supernova light curves and spectra in amounts previously unimaginable, likely uncovering new oddball explosions and further refining the use of supernova as cosmic yardsticks. There's also something profoundly moving about seeing supernovae in distant galaxies. It drives home the point that the life and death of stars is a universal saga. When you see a tiny, bright dot on an image of a galaxy tens of millions of light years away, knowing it's the death throe of a star, possibly someone else's sun in that galaxy, you feel an intimate connection with a distant part of the universe. These events link us with other galaxies, not just in a physical sense, but in a narrative sense. The story of stars and supernovae is a thread that runs through the cosmos, binding our Milky Way to the remotest spiral. From the closest supernova observed with the naked eye in centuries to the farthest detected by our most sensitive telescopes, each is a flash of enlightenment across space and time. Through them, the universe has communicated its nature to us. They have been beacons not only of light, but of knowledge, guiding us to understand cosmic distances, the expansion of space, and the history of galaxies. We have now covered supernovae from the tiny scale of atomic nuclei in a collapsing core to the vast scale of the accelerating universe. It seems fitting, as we near the end of our journey, to reflect on what it all means, how the death of stars is connected to the existence of life, and what philosophical insights we can glean from the cycle of stellar death and rebirth.
Danger in the sky, the threat of supernovas.
Supernovae captivate us with their brilliance and enrich us with their stardust, but they also remind us that the cosmos can be dangerous. A star's death is not only a spectacle, it unleashes a storm of radiation and high-energy particles that can have profound effects on its surroundings. If such an explosion happened close enough to Earth, the consequences could be severe for our planet's biosphere. Have supernovae ever affected life on Earth? Could they in the future? These questions take us from cosmic wonder to an edge of concern. Fortunately, the odds of a supernova occurring very near Earth in our lifetimes are low. Our Sun is not massive enough to explode, and among the nearest stars, none within the critical distance are likely to go supernova soon. The general consensus is that a supernova closer than about 25 to 50 light years could pose a serious threat, primarily by bathing Earth in intense high-energy radiation and a barrage of cosmic rays. The immediate effect of such radiation on Earth's atmosphere would be to erode the ozone layer that shields us from the sun's ultraviolet rays. With the ozone layer damaged, harmful solar UV would flood the surface, potentially causing mass die-offs, especially in marine ecosystems where plankton, the base of the food chain, are vulnerable to UV. Scientists have searched for fingerprints of past supernova effects on Earth. One intriguing find lies in ancient seabed deposits. An excess of the radioactive isotope iron in sediment layers dated around 2,003 million years old. Iron, 60, is produced in supernovae and has a half-life of 2.6 million years, so finding it on Earth's surface implies a relatively recent nearby supernova. Indeed, some studies suggest that one or more supernovae occurred about 2.5 million years ago at 150 light-years away, possibly affecting Earth's climate or contributing to minor extinctions. Another study links increased radiation levels to a minor extinction at the end of the Pliocene epoch, speculating a supernova as a cause. While these connections remain under investigation, they highlight that Earth is not completely immune to astrophysical events. If a supernova happened, say, within 30 light-years, the radiation pulse could cause a mass extinction by wrecking the ozone layer and bombarding life with UV. The geological record does show some unexplained extinction events that some scientists have playfully speculated might be due to nearby gamma, ray bursts, or supernova. Which nearby stars could pose such a threat? The good news is, none of the very closest stars are of the type to explode soon. The nearest massive stars are dozens to hundreds of light years away. Betelgeuse, the red supergiant in Orion, often comes up in discussion. It's about 650 light years away. When Betelgeuse does explode, it will likely put on a spectacular show, potentially bright enough to see in daytime, but it's too distant to harm Earth aside from perhaps some subtle effects on our upper atmosphere. Candidates often mentioned include stars like Antares, or more significantly, a star system called IK Pegasi, which includes a white dwarf that could become a Type Ia supernova in the far future. However, by the time IK Peg's white dwarf accretes enough mass from its companion to explode, it will likely have drifted farther from us. Another potential danger comes from gamma, ray bursts, extremely energetic jets that can accompany certain supernova-like events, especially the collapse of an especially massive, rapidly rotating star into a black hole. If a gamma ray burst were pointed directly at Earth from a few thousand light years away, the focused beam of gamma radiation could be devastating. Even from much further than the supernova's general radiation would be dangerous. Fortunately, such GRBs are rare, and the Milky Way is big. No known GRB progenitor is close enough and aimed at us to cause concern at present. One speculative idea is that a GRB might have caused the Ordovician mass extinction 450 million years ago, but this remains unproven and perhaps unprovable. So, while the risk is never zero, it appears that at this moment in cosmic time, Earth is not in the crosshairs of any nearby supernova candidates. We can be grateful for the margins the cosmos has given us. We live bathed in the gentle radiation of a stable, middle-aged star, far from the volatile furnaces that would endanger us. Even so, the concept of supernova threats has spurred some interesting science. For instance, astronomers have surveyed the sky for traces of past supernovae and keep tabs on the massive stars within a few hundred light years. We are effectively monitoring the environment of our solar neighborhood for potential supernova weather. It's sobering to think that events light years away can influence life on a planet, but it's also part of the dynamic nature of the universe. Human civilization might someday have detectors that could provide an early warning if a nearby star's core collapses. We already have neutrino detectors that would give us a few hours' notice of a supernova. Neutrinos escape the collapsing core before the light from the explosion gets out. Thankfully, the notice will likely be for an exciting show, not a doomsday event. Supernovae, then, are a double-edged sword, creators and destroyers. They likely helped enable life by forging elements and shaping environments, but in rare cases, they might also snuff life out. The very cosmic events that made our existence possible could, under different circumstances, pose a lethal threat. For us, the bottom line is that we should continue to watch the stars, both out of scientific curiosity and for prudent awareness. The night sky is mostly peaceful, but it has its violent moments. Knowing that our planet has likely survived nearby supernovae in the past, we carry on under the stars with both awe and respect. Now that we have contemplated the dangers supernovae might pose, let's turn our attention to some of the most extreme kinds of stellar explosions known, those that push the very limits of power, and those curious cases where a star's death might not produce much visible light at all. Extraordinary explosions, superluminous and pair, instability, supernovas. Just when we might think we've seen it all, the universe surprises us with stellar explosions, even more powerful or peculiar than the standard supernovae we've discussed. In recent decades, astronomers have identified a class of supernova so luminous that they outshine normal supernovae by 10 or even 100 times. These are the superluminous supernovae, cosmic blasts so bright we can detect some from the early universe, billions of light years away. On the other end of the spectrum of weirdness are pair instability supernovae, theorized explosions of the most massive stars that completely obliterate the star. Both types push the boundaries of how stars live and die. Superluminous supernovae. Imagine a star explosion so bright that for a time it can outshine an entire galaxy. In 2007, astronomers observed a supernova, SN 2006 GY, in a relatively nearby galaxy that was over 100 times more luminous than a typical Type II supernova. It stayed bright for many months. This was one of the first confirmed superluminous supernovae, and it left astronomers both excited and puzzled. What could cause such an extraordinary outburst? Since then, many more SLSNE have been found, often in small, distant galaxies with very active star formation. These events reach absolute magnitudes of 21 or 22, meaning at peak, they can be 10 to 50 billion times the brightness of the Sun. What powers such brilliance? In some cases, it may be a central engine, perhaps a newborn magnetar left by the explosion, which pumps energy into the ejector as it spins down. As the magnetar's immense rotational energy is transferred to the expanding gas, it keeps the gas hot and glowing much longer and brighter than usual. In other cases, the cause might be the collision of the supernova's ejector with a dense shell of gas around the star, a shell the star shed in a dramatic eruption before it exploded. The kinetic energy of the explosion gets converted into light in this collision, a bit like a cosmic traffic accident, producing a brilliant flare. SN 2006 GY, for example, is thought to have been such a case. A very massive star might have thrown off a large amount of mass in an eruption or series of eruptions, and then shortly after, its core collapsed and it exploded. The supernova blast wave slammed into the previously expelled gas, producing an extremely bright, long-lasting flash. These types of interactions are classified as Type II supernovae, and indeed, some events observed historically as supernova imposters, where a star suddenly brightened but didn't die, were likely these precursor eruptions. The prime example is Eta Carinae, which in the 1840s became one of the brightest stars in the sky for a few years without exploding. It ejected a massive bipolar nebula and survived. Eta Carinae remains with us, albeit much dimmer now, and is still a ticking time bomb for a future supernova. Its great eruption was a supernova imposter, a false alarm, one might say, hinting at the chaos within the star. Many superluminous supernovae seem to involve stars that had similarly big eruptions shortly before final collapse, essentially setting themselves up for an especially luminous demise. Pair instability supernovae, when stars obliterate themselves.
Now consider the upper limit of stellar mass, say a star with 150 to 250 times the mass of our Sun, something only likely to form in pristine conditions. In such a monster star, during its late evolutionary stages, a strange thing can happen. The core becomes so hot that the energy of gamma ray photons being produced start spontaneously converting into matter and antimatter pairs. This process robs pressure from the core. The sudden drop in pressure causes the core to contract dramatically, the pair instability. This contraction raises temperatures even further, igniting runaway fusion. If conditions are just right, this results in an explosive thermonuclear burning that unbinds the star completely. A pair instability supernova. The star is blown to smithereens. No black hole is formed, because even the core is blasted apart in the explosion. Pair instability supernovae are purely theoretical for now, though there are candidate events. They would be extremely luminous and long-lasting because the star is being burned and ejected entirely. SN 2007 BI is an example that was proposed as a pair instability supernova. It occurred in a small, distant galaxy and was exceptionally bright and slow to fade, with indications that tens of solar masses of nickel were synthesized. If indeed it was such an explosion, It means somewhere out there, a star of around 200 solar masses lived fast and died in a unique way, completely annihilating itself. There are also pulsational pair, instability scenarios, where a massive star doesn't quite blow itself up in one go. Instead, the pair production instability causes a partial collapse and eruption that throws off the star's outer layers but leaves the core intact. The star survives that pulse for a while, until it later perhaps pulses again, or eventually the core collapses to a black hole once enough mass is lost. These pulses can also produce bright transient events. The recently observed oddball IPTF-14HLs, a star that appeared to undergo multiple explosions over a few years, might be an example of a pulsational pair instability event. It baffled astronomers by acting like a supernova that just wouldn't finish dying, brightening, fading, then brightening again 5 separate times over more than 2 years. One hypothesis is that it was a star, perhaps 100 solar masses, that had a series of internal pulsations, blowing off shells of material in eruptions, but not yet destroying its core. Eventually, perhaps that star will finally undergo core collapse and explode for good. But in the meantime, we witnessed a zombie supernova. This shows how even in death, some stars can take an unusual path. Hypernovae and gamma-ray bursts. While on the topic of extremes, it's worth mentioning the term hypernova, often used to describe an exceptionally energetic supernova, typically one associated with a long-duration gamma-ray burst. In the 1990s, as gamma-ray bursts were being localized to distant galaxies, it became clear that at least some long GRBs were linked to the deaths of very massive stars. Essentially, if a very massive star collapses and forms a black hole, and if it has enough angular momentum and magnetic fields to produce collimated jets, we get a GRB, a blast of gamma, rays shooting out along the rotation axis of the star. If Earth lies along the path of one of those jets, we see a GRB. Meanwhile, the star's remaining material still explodes in what we would call a supernova, specifically a type IC, since the star has likely shed its hydrogen and helium envelopes. These explosions can be extremely energetic, because the jets deposit additional energy into the ejector. SN 1998BW, coincident with GRB 980425, was the first strong case of a GRB-related hypernova. It was unusually luminous in radio and had very high expansion velocities. Since then, a few dozen GRB supernovae have been observed, confirming that at least some of the brightest explosions come from this engine-driven mechanism. All these extraordinary explosions, superluminous supernovae, pair, instability events, pulsational multi-explosion stars, and hypernovae with gamma-ray bursts, demonstrate the incredible range of fates that befall the most massive of stars. They are relatively rare, but they are crucial to testing the limits of physics. They show us what happens in stars at the upper mass limits, how the first stars might have died, and how the most extreme energies in the stellar regime are released. These explosions also stretch our vocabulary and our understanding. They have forced astronomers to expand theories, to include magnetospin, down energy in light curves, to consider matter, antimatter pair creation in stellar cores, to account for asymmetric jets ripping a star apart. They are the flamboyant outliers of the supernova family, but often in those outliers lie insights into regimes of nature we cannot replicate on Earth. On the flip side, just as some stars explode more spectacularly than expected, some massive stars may fail to explode at all, collapsing into darkness with hardly a trace. Not every stellar death results in a bright supernova. Next, we will explore these enigmatic failed supernovae, cases where a star's core collapses into a black hole and yet produces little or no visible explosion. The ones that failed, when stars collapse without a bang. Throughout our journey, we have assumed that when a massive star's core collapses, a titanic explosion, a supernova, inevitably follows. But nature has a more silent ending on the menu as well. Sometimes a star can die with hardly a whimper. In these cases, the core implodes,
And instead of blasting the star's outer layers apart, it simply pulls them inward, swallowing the star into a newly formed black hole. These are the so-called failed supernovae. For a long time, failed supernovae were speculative. Simulations of core collapse hinted that if the conditions weren't just right, say, if the shockwave lost too much energy and couldn't be revived by neutrinos, the infalling star might never explode. The core would become a black hole, and aside from perhaps a brief cough of energy, the star would just disappear. What would that look like to an observer? Perhaps a star would brighten a little as the core started to collapse, then fade away forever. In recent years, astronomers have actually been looking for this phenomenon. How do you catch a star failing to explode? One approach is to watch many supergiant stars in nearby galaxies over time and see if any simply vanish. Remarkably, one candidate has emerged. A star in galaxy NGC 6946 was observed to brighten modestly in 2009, and then by 2015, it had vanished from optical view. It was a hefty red supergiant before it disappeared. This object, nicknamed N6946 BH1, likely underwent core collapse and formed a black hole without a successful supernova. There was a small burp of light, a sort of mini explosion or outburst, when it brightened in 2009, but no big supernova explosion followed. The star just became a memory, detectable now only as a faint infrared source. It appears we observed a failed supernova in real time, the first of its kind. One hypothesis is that the core of the star collapsed directly into a black hole, and the weak shock generated wasn't enough to eject the star's outer layers. Instead, most of the star fell into the black hole. The small amount of energy released by the core collapse created a faint transient event. Indeed, some very massive stars might shed a bit of their envelope or produce a low-energy explosion, but still end up mostly collapsing, what we call a fallback supernova or failed supernova. Why would a star fail to explode? It likely depends on mass and the detailed physics of the core collapse. It's thought that stars above roughly 17,020 solar masses might have a harder time exploding. If the core forms a black hole quickly, it can swallow infalling material so fast that the shock is smothered. Alternatively, if the star has a very large, extended envelope, the shock might stall out in that envelope without unbinding it. The evidence is mounting. We see fewer supernovae from the very most massive red supergiants than expected, perhaps because those stars quietly collapse instead. It seems quite plausible that many black holes in our galaxy formed without a bang. What would a failed supernova look like up close? Suppose we were watching a massive star in its final days. We might see it start to dim and brighten irregularly as it undergoes convulsive nuclear burning of silicon. Then, perhaps, a sudden but short-lived glow. The outer layers briefly heating as the core collapses, and maybe a weak shock travels outward. The star might expel a small fraction of its material. Neutrinos would flood out, possibly the only strong cry of the dying star. Then, the light fades. The star's surface material, which didn't get enough of a push to escape, rains back down into the black hole. To an optical telescope, the star simply vanishes. In NGC 6946, astronomers literally have before and after images. The star was there, and then it wasn't. If such a failed supernova happened in our galactic neighborhood, we might detect it not by light, but by an outpouring of neutrinos, ghostly particles released by the imploding core without a bright optical display. Future neutrino observatories could potentially catch these subtle signals of a star collapsing directly into a black hole, giving us a heads up even when the star itself disappears in darkness. Failed supernovae are a chilling reminder that not all stars go out with a glorious finale. Some simply cease to shine, leaving no glowing remnants, just an invisible gravitating mass. If massive stars can collapse quietly,
there might be many dark corpses drifting in galaxies, undetected unless they interact with a companion or surrounding gas. An entire population of silent black holes could be lurking, each marking a life that ended without fanfare. Even so, such a death would not be entirely without a signal. A collapsing star still floods its core with neutrinos and rattles space-time with gravitational vibrations, even if no light escapes. Future neutrino observatories and gravitational wave detectors might pick up these subtle clues of a failed supernova, alerting us to a cosmic death that optical telescopes would miss entirely. The search for failed supernovae continues. With more years of data and more eyes on the sky, we hope to better quantify how often stars vanish without an explosion. It's an important piece of the puzzle of stellar evolution. It affects how many supernovae we count versus how many black holes we expect, and it tells us about the upper limits of how a star can die. We have journeyed now through nearly every twist and turn in the saga of stellar death, from spectacular hypernovae to silent collapses. All that remains is to step back and reflect on the grand picture one more time. Why do supernovae matter on the deepest level? What do they mean for us, living on a small planet around an ordinary star? In our final section, we consider the philosophical reflections that supernovae inspire. How, in their death, stars sow the seeds of new life, and how we, in turn, owe our existence to these cosmic catastrophes.
Epilogue. From death comes life.
We have traveled among giant stars and witnessed their demise. We have walked through cosmic time to see how each supernova, in destroying a star, contributes to the creation of something new. Now, at the end of our journey, we pause and look back at the grand tapestry we've been part of. A profound pattern emerges. In this universe, death is not simply an end, but a transformation. The death of stars is intimately linked to the birth of everything we hold dear. Consider the atoms that compose our bodies. Every breath we take, every glance we cast at the stars, we do so with atoms that were once inside of stars. Many inside stars that blew themselves apart long before the Earth existed. It took the violent sacrifice of countless stars to sprinkle the cosmos with carbon, oxygen, iron, and the rest of the periodic table. Only then could the clouds that formed our sun and Earth have the ingredients to build rocky planets and living organisms. In a very literal sense, we are the children of supernovae. Each one of us is a composite of stardust, forged in stellar hearts and scattered in stellar graves. This truth carries deep poetry. The universe has a cycle akin to the seasons. Stars are born, live gloriously, and die. From their remains, new stars take form. Out of destruction comes creation. It is a cycle that has been ongoing for billions of years, gradually enriching the cosmos and increasing its complexity. When we look at the night sky, we see the gleam of stars that will one day cease to exist. Some will quietly fade, others will end in spectacular explosions. Yet from their ruin, new worlds may one day blossom. Perhaps somewhere in our galaxy, a supernova exploding today is seeding a nebula that, in 5 billion years, will give rise to a star and planets. And perhaps life and consciousness that will look up and wonder, as we do. There is a powerful philosophical echo here, impermanence and renewal. Stars, for all their immense power and longevity compared to our lives, are not eternal. They are born from dust and gas. They return to dust and gas. But in that returning, they fertilize space for new stars. The cosmos recycles itself. Endings are not only terminations, they are also beginnings in disguise. A supernova is an ending for a star, but the beginning of a nebula, the beginning of new chemical dispersal, the potential beginning of future life cycles. We humans, existing on our small planet, owe our existence to this grand and sometimes violent cycle. Perhaps counterintuitively, we owe our lives to explosions so distant in space and time we cannot name the sources. A star had to die for you to live. And not just one star, many. The gold in your jewelry, the iodine in your thyroid, the calcium in your teeth, these probably came from different supernovae scattered across the Milky Way over the past 10 billion years. You are an amalgam of stellar legacies. Realizing this connects us intimately to the cosmos. The boundary between us and the universe blurs. The universe is within us, literally. When ancient people saw supernovae, they often imbued them with divine or mystical significance. Today, through science, we see no less magic. If anything, the magic is amplified by understanding. Knowing that a point of light is a star ripping itself apart, and that such events made the world we know possible, adds layers of meaning to that transient star in the sky. In a way, we can view supernovae as the universe's way of keeping life possible. A universe without supernovae would be static and impoverished in elements, perhaps devoid of complex chemistry and life. Supernovae inject dynamism. They ensure that the universe doesn't stagnate, that material cycles through different forms. Out of the quiet, cold hydrogen of the early cosmos, supernova helped cook up the rich, warm complexity of planets and living organisms. As we conclude our cosmic journey, let's picture one more scene. We stand on a hill under a clear night sky. Above us, the Milky Way arches, a river of starlight. We know now that scattered among those stars are supernova remnants, the ghosts of long-dead suns, and perhaps a few stars that even now as we watch, are living out their final moments, soon to explode. We feel the gentle night breeze, we hear the quiet of Earth, but we are aware of a colossal, ongoing drama playing out in silence overhead. One of those pinpoints of light might suddenly flare bright in our lifetimes, a nearby supernova gifting us a celestial spectacle, and while we gaze in awe, perhaps a being in another star system far away might at that same moment witness our sun as just another pinpoint in their sky, not knowing that around it a species capable of reflection and gratitude has arisen, thanks in part to
ancient supernova. The cycle of stellar life and death is far grander than us, yet we find our own story within it. It instills humility. We are small and our lives flicker more briefly than any star, but also great connection. We are a way for the cosmos to know itself, born of its very fires. When a supernova's light reaches our telescopes after traveling for centuries or millennia, it is almost as if the universe is telling us its story, whispering through the night. See, this is how I renew myself. This is how, from death, I create life. And so, the next time we look up at the stars, we can remember that we are part of this cosmic story. The iron in our blood was once in the core of a massive star that died in a blaze of glory. The oxygen we breathe was forged in the belly of stars and spread by supernova winds. We are the universe, made conscious. We are stuff contemplating the stars. Supernovae are chapters in the universe's story, dramatic, violent chapters that nonetheless lead to creativity and rebirth. We began with cosmic death and rebirth. We end recognizing that they are one and the same. In the grand cycle of the cosmos, destruction and creation are intertwined. The universe evolves through this cycle, and we are one expression of its continual rebirth. In understanding supernovas, we understand ourselves a little better. Ephemeral, yet inextricably connected to eternity, fragile yet born of explosions, finite yet integral to an infinite cosmic cycle. The stars have died to give us life, and in their memory, we live on and wonder, adding our own chapter to the saga of the cosmos.